to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Beth, can we have a roll call?
Chairman, we have to do the sunshine law, please.
We have a roll call?
We-
Oh, sunshine law. Oh, has the meeting been called, the planning board meeting been, published in accordance with the sunshine law?
Yes, Chairman, it has.
Okay, we'll have a roll call now.
Mr. Allegra,
Here.
Mr. Bolton,
Here.
Mr. Elmeyer, Ms. Larman. Here. Mr. Mueller,
Here.
Mr. Shaw,
Here.
Mr. Voloshin,
Here.
Councilman Zabrowski,
Here.
Chairman Ty,
Here.
Mr. Cornell, Mr. Fowler,
Here.
Mr. Sordillo,
Here.
Mr. Pullman,
Here.
Mr.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Was it memorialization of resolutions,
No, Chairman, we do.
accepting the minutes,
None this evening,
communication agenda?
none this evening.
Mr. Sachs, the floor is yours.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, before
Oh,
we get to
okay.
there, if I can just make accomplish two items. One, just so everyone's on the board is aware, we have received a copy of the transcript for this, the prior hearing on this. Anyone who was not at the last meeting must review those transcripts and certify. I will provide a certification for you that you've done so before you are able to vote on this application. I'm not sure if we're going to get to a vote tonight, but assuming we do not, I will need to have that done. You have to complete that and have that done before you're able to vote. Second, we do have a special professional on behalf of the board here this evening in connection with this application, who is a traffic engineer expert on behalf of the board. And since he is a special professional being presented just for this application, we need to swear him in, so in case any testimony he might provide in connection with this application. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you'll be giving tonight and any future hearings on this application will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Sachs, it's all yours.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lawrence Sachs, on behalf of the applicant, Masjid Sadar House of Worship. If the board will recall, we were here back on April 3rd, and that meeting was held over at the Borough Council chambers. At that particular time, we produced two witnesses, Mr. Adnan Khan, who is our professional engineer, who provided us, basically gave a site layout, covered all of the site amenities, the site features, the design of the parking lot, and the actual site plan itself. We also had our architect testify, who testified as to the 4 elevations for this building and also a floor plan. And incorporated into both of those witnesses, we covered much of the operations that are proposed for this site. There were several questions that the board had at the last meeting that needed to be clarified. One of them was a question about the square footage of the building, and maybe just for the record, I will state what the proposed square footage is. The first floor is 23,082 square feet. The second floor, 13,460 square feet. And the third floor is 8,299 square feet. The total building square footage is 44,841 square feet. Another question came up about whether or not we had contacted the fire marshal or if they had an opportunity to review those plans. Shortly after that meeting, we did provide a copy of the plans to your fire marshal. My understanding is they're going to be issuing a letter to this board with any conclusions or recommendations from a fire safety standpoint. There was a question from the board about the possibility of obtaining or constructing a sidewalk on Ernston Road on our site frontage, and I believe our engineer testified that is not something that the county was in favor of. However, I will indicate to the board and to the board's professionals that we're going to reintroduce that concept to the county because I think it is a good idea. And if we can get a sidewalk in, we'll do that as well. And finally, I think we had stated this on the record. We would agree to do some type of vibration study prior to any construction, which certainly could be a condition of any approval. So where does that leave us this evening? We went into the engineering, we went into the architecturals. What I'd like to do this evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board professionals, is I would like to get into the traffic, which I'm sure the board is concerned about. And I have a witness here this evening, my traffic engineer, who will provide that testimony. We also received the report from Mr. Fissinger, who is your board expert with respect to traffic, and we're prepared to address some of the comments and questions that were raised in his report as well. So, Mr. Chairman, at this point, if I could have Mr. William Stimmel, our traffic engineer, sworn in, I'll qualify him and I'll let him testify as to traffic studies and traffic on this site and off-site.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, will you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give this evening is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Please state your name and spell it for the record.
William Stimmel, S-T-I, M as in Michael, M as in Michael, E-L. Better?
Yes.
Did you get it? You got it for the record? Okay. Oh, state it again, Mr.
William
Stimmel.
Stimmel, S-T-I-M-M-E-L.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Stimmel, if you can give the board the benefit of your educational and professional background.
Sure. I'm a graduate of NJIT with a degree in civil engineering. I've been employed for the past 25 years in the state of New Jersey as an engineer and a planner. I'm a licensed engineer. I've been licensed since 2004. I'm a licensed planner since 2010. Both of those licenses are current. I'm also a certified professional traffic operations engineer and have served as an adjunct at NJIT in the civil engineering department teaching a traffic and transportation design class.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to accept his credentials.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the
Thank
board.
you.
All right, Mr. Stimmel, I know that you've obviously prepared a comprehensive traffic study. You've been out to this site on a number of occasions, and if you could give the board the benefit of what you performed and what your conclusions and findings are.
Certainly. Thank you to the board, of course. Going to start off by reviewing the traffic study, which was submitted August 8th of 2023 for the application. All the board members have received copies of this. The study, the typical traffic study involves going out, doing traffic counts at one intersection, looking at ITE projections for the site-generated traffic, and applying that, and then analyzing existing future conditions without the development, future conditions with the development. This, I think, is a little bit atypical in terms of a traffic study. First of all, because I think whereas everyone is familiar with the apartments and gas stations and fast food restaurants and when they're busy and how they operate, I think that the proposed mosque is probably something a little bit new for a lot of people. So we spent a lot of time coordinating with the board's professionals, CME, as well as with the county to develop a scope for the traffic study. And that was what was in the study that was originally submitted, and again revised through August 8th of 23. The other unusual piece of the puzzle with this application is the fact that the ITE, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, does not have a lot of good data published for this type of use. You know, some of those other uses that I mentioned, the gas station and so on, you might have hundreds and hundreds of data points in the ITE trip generation manual, whereas for a mosque, you only have 2. So the data is a little bit questionable, so we were forced to rely on data based on observations of the operation at the site when the mosque had been operating at the property, as well as a number of conversations with the client for how they anticipate the facility to operate in the future. So with that said, just a brief discussion of the existing site conditions. The subject property is about 2.5 acres. It's located along westbound Ernston Road. There's currently 2 single-family residential structures, and then a third structure, which had been a residence, had later been a professional office, and was most recently used as the mosque. Each one of those sites, or combined between the 3 sites, there's a total of 4 full movement driveways, and that would be to the west of the intersection with Center Avenue. So 4 full movement driveways on the property under existing conditions. The applicant proposes to demolish all of the structures on the subject property and construct a new mosque. It's going to be somewhat centrally located, a bit offset to the rear of the property. There's going to be 1 full movement driveway at the eastern portion of the site and 1 driveway which allows full ingress and right turn only egress at the western portion of the driveway. They had been proposed at one point to be both full movement. We had looked at various other access scenarios with the county, and based on their feedback, this is the design that was moving forward. At the time the traffic study was submitted, both driveways were projected to be full movement, though, so that's what I'm going to talk about first. We have a schedule of events which was provided to us by the client. Just to briefly run through that, there's typical regular daily prayers which occur 5 times a day, 7 days a week. You're talking about something along the lines of 15 to 30 vehicles. You've got the primary Friday afternoon prayers, which was the focus of our traffic study. I think it's clear at this point that that is when the mosque is going to be at its busiest. We anticipate 2 sessions with 60 to 90 vehicles, occupying 60 to 90 parking spaces, of course. Religious education on Sunday afternoons with approximately 32 children attending. 32 vehicles would enter the site, but very limited use of the parking because the parents would generally drop off and leave. The prayer for the deceased, something akin to a funeral service that many people might be more familiar with. Obviously, it occurs as necessary. You'd have something along the lines of 60 to 100 persons attending, 30 to 50 vehicles, 30 to 50 occupied parking spaces. Religious weddings, again, as needed, typically on a Saturday afternoon. These are a little bit smaller. You'd have 20 to 30 persons attending with 10 to 15 vehicles, and there would be no wedding receptions held on the subject property. That was already stipulated to at the last meeting, and it's in the record. And then finally, family nights, which would occur once a month on Friday nights with 90 to 100 persons attending. Because it's a family-oriented event, we anticipate high occupancy of the vehicles and only 25 or so vehicles staying on the property for the duration. So these are all scheduled events. Obviously, there's some variation in the funerals and the weddings, but they're planned ahead of time. Nothing occurs spur of the moment. There's not a situation where 2 events are scheduled at the same time, and certainly nothing else will be occurring during the same time as that Friday afternoon prayer service. The other point, which it's important to mention, and I guess this would be an appropriate time to do so, is that the facility is not going to be in operation 24 hours a day. There was some discussion of that the last time, and that is just not the case. So typically the daily prayer services, which occur 5 times a day, would mark the beginning and the end of a regular day at the mosque, with the earliest service being at 6 o'clock and the latest service being at about 8:30. The existing roadway network in the vicinity of the site, obviously the site fronts on Ernston Road, also known as County Route 673. It's under the jurisdiction of Middlesex County. There's 1 lane provided for travel in each direction. Because of the fact that we're located along a county road, the county ultimately has jurisdiction over the site driveway and the driveway configuration. Bordentown Avenue is the closest intersection to the west, also known as County Route 615, again, under the jurisdiction of Middlesex County. There are 4 driveways which intersect Ernston Road along the site frontage. 3 of them effectively operate as residential driveways, and the one is a little bit wider with striped turning lanes. The nearest intersection is Ernston Road and Bordentown Avenue. It's a 4-leg intersection controlled by a traffic signal. The northbound, southbound, and eastbound approaches to the intersection each provide a left turn lane, a through lane, and a right turn lane. The westbound approach to the intersection, which you'd be using if you made a right out of the site driveway, provides a left turn lane, a through lane, and a shared through right turn lane. There are two minor intersections along Ernston Road between the site frontage and the intersection with Bordentown Avenue, those being Parkway Place and Rutgers Road. These are stop-controlled intersections with the Ernston Road traffic having the right-of-way. Any site-generated traffic added to those intersections is anticipated to consist primarily of through traffic along Ernston Road and will have a minimal impact on operations at these locations. We did a number of traffic counts. We did two separate sets of traffic counts with the submission of the initial traffic study. The first set of traffic counts were done Friday, April 29th of 2022 from 12 p.m. until 4 p.m. at the driveways for 216 Ernston Road when the mosque was in operation. So that was done while school was in session.
Sorry, can you repeat that date again?
The first round of traffic counts that were done for this case were on Friday, April 29th of 2022 from 12 p.m. until 4 p.m. So school was in session on that day. I know that the board members and the residents were concerned about collecting data while school was in session. And it's also worth noting that the mosque was in operation at that time, since been shut down, obviously, but at that time it was operating. So we captured driveway volumes at the mosque under those previously existing conditions. Those time periods were selected to capture high volumes of street traffic as well as high volumes of site-generated traffic. Again, we expect that the busiest time for the mosque is going to be that Friday afternoon prayer service. Based on those counts, the existing peak hour traffic volumes at the mosque driveways were found to occur from 1 p.m. until 2 p.m., which reflects the peak times for the Friday prayers. At the request of the board engineer, that being CME Associates, additional traffic counts were conducted at the intersection of Ernston Road and Bordentown Avenue on Friday, June 16th, 2023 from 12 until 4 p.m., and again on Sunday, June 18th, 2023 from 9:30 a.m. until 1:30 p.m. So that Friday count was conducted on a day when there was no school, although school was still in session. Clearly not an attempt to pull any subterfuge. It was just a matter of we had some back and forth with the board engineer until we settled on a scope, until we found a Friday when we had people available to count it. That's just when it fell. We had already had the earlier counts while school was in session, and we needed to collect additional data that included Bordentown Avenue, both for the Friday peak hour, but also for the Sunday peak hour. And rather than wait until the end of the summer and put the project on ice for 3 months, we did it when the opportunity presented itself. That intersection was selected due to the orientation of site-generated traffic at the site driveways when the mosque was in operation. So peak hour volumes for the intersection of Ernston Road and Bordentown Avenue based on those June of 23 counts are appended to the traffic study as Figure 2 representing the existing conditions. We had also collected data at two other nearby mosques in the vicinity of the site to try to establish vehicle occupancy rates, meaning if you count 20 cars going into the mosque driveway for prayer services, how many people on average are in each of those cars? So we counted two mosques in the area. One is the Anjuman Berhani Mosque in East Brunswick. The other is the Dawatul Islamia Mosque in Somerset. So one is a larger facility. It has a footprint of about 15,000 square feet with a substantial parking area. The other one is a little bit smaller and presents as a residential dwelling, more or less. It has two driveways and a parking lot at the rear, but the occupancies per vehicle were very close for both of those two sites. It was 1.82 persons per vehicle for the one and 1.88 persons per vehicle for the other. So we took the existing traffic volumes, we analyzed them utilizing highway capacity software. For the members of the public who aren't familiar, this software takes different parameters of an intersection, lane configuration, traffic volume, signal timing, truck percentages, et cetera, and analyzes the delay at each approach and at each lane grouping, and then assigns a grade based on that average delay on an A through F scale. So it's just like when you were in school, A is the best and F is the worst. So the analysis of the existing traffic volumes for that study intersection are shown on the attached Figure 3. As indicated, the movements at the intersection operate at level of service C or D under existing conditions for that 1 to 2 p.m. period on a Friday afternoon. Site-generated traffic volumes, as I had said before, there's not a lot of industry data available for MOSCs. The ITE, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, has limited data at 2 sample sites, and there was no data available through the DOT. So the projections for future traffic volumes are based on a comparison of existing volumes at the site, in addition to what the client projects as a result of the proposed development. So currently the site has, previously in 2022, the site had prayers once per afternoon during that Friday peak period. 150 vehicles entered the site during the busiest hour of the Friday peak based on those traffic counts that were conducted in 22. And that day was selected because it represented a holiday for the celebrants and was anticipated to have higher volumes of traffic on that day than on a typical Friday. Again, the Friday prayers are expected to be the peak of site-generated traffic. Anticipated service attendance on Friday afternoons is expected to be no greater than 90 vehicles. In the future, the applicant, if the facility is approved, will have 2 separate prayers on Friday afternoons, thus splitting the traffic versus what had been previously occurring. The board engineer was also concerned about the volume of traffic generated by the religious instruction for children on Sundays, so that's why we also included the Sunday peak hour in the analysis of operations. We anticipated 30 vehicles at the start of the session, entering the site, 30 vehicles, exiting the site at the end of the session, thinking that parents would be likely to drop off their children and run errands or go home or whatever they do and then come back when it's over. We didn't take any credit for the possibility or the likelihood, in fact, that you would certainly have siblings, cousins, neighbors that might be inclined to carpool together to go to those religious education classes. So the projected site-generated traffic for both the Friday peak hour and the Sunday religious education services were routed through the adjoining intersection and through the site driveways based on the percentages observed in June of 22 at the site driveways when the mosque was in operation. So the projected site traffic volumes are shown on the attached figure 4 of the report. The CME had also asked that we look at data published for churches as a point of comparison. Using the assembly area of 19,941 square feet, the traffic associated with the church would be about 105 vehicles, 211 trips during the critical Sunday peak hour, which is comparable, I would say, to what is anticipated for the proposed mosque, although the church would experience its peak hours of traffic generation on Sunday morning as opposed to on Friday afternoon for the mosque. Future traffic volumes, in order to account for background traffic growth in the area as well as other developments in Sayreville, existing traffic volumes were increased by a growth rate of 1% for a 2-year build-out period. So it was 2023 when the study was submitted through 2025 to develop the future no-build traffic volumes. The 1% growth rate was selected based on data published by the DOT for minor arterial roadways in Middlesex County. So the future volumes without site traffic, with just the background traffic growth, are shown on figure 5 of the report. The future volumes with the site traffic and the background traffic growth are shown on figure 6 of the report. So once again, as with the existing conditions, the future no-build and build traffic volumes were analyzed using the highway capacity software. The results of those analyses are shown on figures 7 and 8 respectively. There were no changes when comparing levels of service for movements under existing no-build and build conditions at the study intersections. All movements at the site driveways were projected to operate at level of service B during both the Friday and Sunday peak periods. All of those levels of service are shown on the figures at the end of the report. They're also shown along with the average delay for each of the movements in the appended level of service delay table. The applicant has agreed to hire an off-duty officer from the Sayreville Police Department to control traffic at the site driveways during and after Friday prayer services, as well as periodic events which are expected to have higher than typical attendance. Per the results of these analysis, the impact of site-generated traffic on levels of service is negligible. The parking supply, based on a review of the site plan prepared by AWZ Engineering, last revised February 3rd of 23, clearly the site plan has been revised several times since then, the applicant's required to provide 113 parking spaces for the combined place of worship, gymnasium, office, and classrooms. So that 113 spaces is based on the calculation for the assembly area with a requirement of 1 parking space per 250 square feet. Where no seating is provided, that's the calculation that the ordinance requires the applicant to use. So the higher requirement of 362 parking spaces, I believe it was, using 1 space per 3 seats, is not relevant here because there's not seating proposed in the assembly area. So 113 parking spaces are required, 109 parking spaces are proposed. We do need a variance based on that deficiency of 4 parking spaces. Just a reminder, the gymnasium will not be in use when the prayer services are being conducted. The parking required for the gymnasium constitutes 46 of the 113 required parking spaces. Therefore, we believe that the proposed parking supply is adequate for the intended use of the property and would address the demand for parking on the property under the majority of conditions. As far as site layout and circulation, I think the site layout is generally compliant with the ordinance requirements. The typical parking spaces on site measure 9 feet by 18 feet in accordance with engineering standards. There's 6 ADA parking spaces provided, including 2 accessible spaces. There's 24-foot wide aisles throughout the parking area, and the provision of 2 access points allows for safe and efficient access to the site, as well as relatively quick distribution of traffic to the roadway network when the primary services are over. I do touch on the Middlesex County review. I noted that application materials have been provided to Middlesex County for review, subject to county approval due to the fact that it's a county road. And it says at this point the county has not granted final approval, and they still have not granted final approval, but we do have conditional approval for the driveways and the drainage and the site concerns in general from Middlesex County. There are some technical comments that remain outstanding, but nothing that would impact the likelihood of obtaining an approval. So that is the initial traffic study that was submitted.
All right, thank you, Mr. Stimmel. Let me ask you a question. So you did, the initial study was done in 2022 when the mosque was still operational at that point.
Correct.
All right, and then you did another study in June of 2023. Unfortunately, school was not in session on that date, and I think you indicated the reason that you scheduled it then was just, that was really when we determined what the scope of the review was going to be, and that's when the counts could be done. But notwithstanding that, you did another study as well in 2024, is that correct?
Correct.
All right, and if you just want to just give the board the benefit of your findings with respect to that study that I believe was done in February, is that correct?
It was submitted in March. The traffic counts were done in February. Traffic counts were done March 1st, actually. I stand corrected. So we submitted an addendum to the traffic study March 12th of 24. There were 2 notable changes in that traffic study. The first was that the western driveway had been modified to eliminate left turn egress movements based on direction from Middlesex County. The second change was that updated traffic counts have been performed at the intersection of Ernston Road and Bordentown Avenue while school was in session as recommended in the February 21st, 2024 letter from CME Associates. So we performed updated traffic counts at the intersection of Ernston Road and Bordentown Avenue on March 1st, 2024 from 12 p.m. until 4 p.m. What we found is that during that 4-hour count period, the overall intersection volumes were 6.9% higher than those collected in June of 23 on that day when school was not in session. Specific to looking at the 1 to 2 p.m. window, the peak hour counts were 8.2% higher than in June of 2023. Traffic at a given location can be expected to fluctuate within a range of plus or minus 10% on a daily basis without the impact of outside factors. And by outside factors, I mean snow, construction, special events, detours, traffic accidents, things of that nature. The updated counts completed were within that range, but to address any concerns that the board and the members of the public might have related on school traffic, we did provide an updated analysis using the same methodology as in the TIA that was submitted, revised through August 8th of 23. With the updated analysis contained in that addendum, there were no changes to level of service at the intersection of Ernston Road and Bordentown Avenue when comparing existing no-build and build conditions. There was no change in level of service when comparing the Friday peak hour based on the June of 23 counts or the March of 24 counts, with one exception. The exit movements at the western driveway actually improved with the updated counts from level of service C to B. I don't want to call it a trick, it's something of an illusion because you take a weighted average of the delay for the left and right turn movements exiting the driveway. When you take the left turns out, they're assumed to take longer, so all you're looking at is the delay for the right turn vehicle. So there's really no change in levels of service. As it shows in the addendum, there is a slight improvement for the egress movements at the western driveway. We had concluded in the August 8th, 23 TIA that the proposed development will have minimal operations at the study intersection and site driveways, the changes to the access configuration required by the county, and the updated traffic counts did not certainly affect that conclusion.
Okay. Now, since the last hearing that we had on April 3rd, we received a report from the board's traffic consultant, Brightview Engineering, Mr. Fishinger, who I know is here this evening. And I assume you've had an opportunity to review that, and I'm assuming you're prepared to respond to that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, if you'd like, I wouldn't mind, and if it's okay with your board professionals, I'd like to go through there are a number of comments and questions raised in that Brightview report, and we'd like to at least put testimony on the record. Okay, thank you. All right, so with that said, Mr. Stemmel, if you can, if you want to just briefly talk about the comment that's made on the Brightview report, and then your particular response to any questions that Mr. Fishinger may have had.
Certainly. The letter from Mr. Fishinger's office is dated April 9th of 2024. There are a total of 13 comments related to, I'm going to call it traffic operations, and then an additional 14 comments related to site plan issues, circulation, et cetera. I'm going to start off under the traffic impact study. Comment number 1 talks about the counts being conducted in March of 24 and June of 23. Noted that the counts are consistent with, generally consistent with historic data in the area. Recommended that additional count data be collected to determine the traditional weekday morning, weekday late afternoon, weekday evening, and Saturday midday peak hours on Ernston Road. Further recommended a 7-day ATR style count. We've counted the site frontage, we've counted the intersection with Bordentown Road a number of times. We've had extensive consultation with the board professionals, the board's regular engineer, CME Associates. We've also gone through the review process and received conditional approval from the county. Certainly, I hope at this point we're all in agreement that the Friday prayer service is the peak time for operations at the proposed mosque. The DOT has collected traffic data along Ernston Road to the west of Bordentown Avenue, which we can review and summarize. But at this point, we believe we've collected enough data to show what the operation of the site is going to be like. The second comment is based on a recent visit on the afternoon of Friday, March 22nd. The westbound approach to the traffic signal at Ernston Road and Bordentown backs up past the site frontage. Additional information / testimony should be provided regarding these backups. So we had collected the traffic data at the mosque in April of 24 when it was operational using video camera. So I went back and looked at the video footage at the location of the existing site driveway, the easternmost driveway, which would be the full movement driveway under proposed conditions. It's approximately the same location. And what I found from watching 5 hours of video there is that generally speaking, traffic is flowing freely across the site frontage. You get a handful of queues.
We're drowning out. We can't have that. We have to get this on transcript. If you could please keep the laughter down, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Quiet up.
So generally, in the period for which we had video, from 11:15 until 4:15, traffic is freely flowing across the site frontage. There were a handful of queues which extended across the property frontage, which could be certainly from the signal, could be from school buses going by with the stop sign arm stopping traffic, could be from people waiting to make a left turn into one of the streets on the Old Bridge side of the road. It could be for a number of factors. But that was a handful of times during that period. There was a period of queuing when the mosque discharged their services. Again, that was the peak Friday service. Under a holiday condition, there was only one service at that time. So there was a significant amount of traffic leaving the mosque. But the cars pulled out into traffic. People generally stopped to let them out. It actually may have been easier to make left turns coming out of the driveways at that time because cars were slowing down for the queue at that location. But within 10 minutes, let's say, the queue from the mosque operation cleared. It happened again later at the same time that the Samsel Elementary School dismissed. And again, it was similar in nature, I would say. It lasted 10, 15 minutes, something along those lines. There was a rush of traffic leaving the school, the light cycled through, and the traffic eventually cleared up. So in terms of the queues from the light at Ernston Road and Bordentown backing up past the site frontage, I don't anticipate it interfering to any great extent with the operations of the site during those primary prayer services on Friday afternoons. On the occasions that it does, it doesn't inherently pose a safety issue because you've got a one-lane road in each direction, so there's no zigzagging between lanes to beat traffic or anything like that. Add in the fact that the applicant, again, has stipulated that they would provide a uniform police traffic director at the property to help direct traffic. I don't see an issue with it.
All right, and before you get to the next point, so at the time that the mosque was in operation back in 2022, it was one service, and it was a full movement driveway. Obviously, we're talking about an entirely different situation now with this proposal, with obviously two services and restrictions on turns.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? What was the square footage of the mosque back in April 22?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
What's the square footage of the mosque from April 2022?
Not sure. It was much smaller, we know that. We know that. Mr. Chairman, we're having difficulty with the transcript. If we get any chatter from anyone, thank you.
We need to have silence. We have to get this on transcript in case we need it. So if you just keep it down, I'd appreciate it. You're doing a great job, but it's what it is.
Yeah,
And Mr. Stimmel, how many is a handful for backups?
6.
6. And what were the times?
I'd have to go back and look at my notes for that. I can find it.
So 6 over the period of 5 hours of video?
Aside from those two windows, the one when the mosque discharged and the one when the school discharged, but it was only a handful of times.
For record, 6?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Stemmel, if you want to respond to some of the other questions raised in the Brightview report.
Sure, just kind of move forward with the review for Mr. Fishinger. Comment number 3. It includes an analysis of the intersection of Ernston Road and Bordentown Road for Friday between 1 and 2 p.m. And then it goes on to a discussion of some of the different data sets that were provided and asked for clarification and justification for the use of the 1 to 2 p.m. Friday midday peak hour. That was selected as it was the time period that represented the peak of traffic based on the original traffic counts. Certainly, we could update that. We've got a number of different data sets, and I think, assuming which is fair that we're not going to complete this application tonight. We can coordinate with Mr. Fishinger in the interim and settle on what he believes is an appropriate peak hour. Annual background traffic growth, comment number 4. In December of 2023, the DOT published an annual background growth rate table, which increased the traffic growth for urban minor arterials to 2.75%. So DOT publishes data with background traffic growth rates for different kind of roadways based on counties, based on urban and rural locations. When the traffic study was originally prepared and submitted, that data reflected a 1% growth rate for urban minor arterials in Middlesex County, which is how they classify Ernston Road. So that's what was used in the study. They've since updated their data. It now shows 2.75%. Generally speaking, we don't have any issue with updating the report to reflect this. I would note, and this gets into the next comment, I contacted the Sayreville Zoning Department and the Old Bridge Zoning Department, and there are no other developments in the area which are expected to impact traffic operations along that section of Ernston Road. So nothing in planning that they're aware of and nothing under construction right now. The other part of that is that those background traffic growth rates, for the purposes of a traffic study, are assumed to occur whether or not this application moves forward. So when you're comparing the no-build and build volumes for the future conditions, you're raising both sets. So the difference between the two doesn't change. So it, to some extent, gets lost in the background noise when you're looking at it. Comment number 6 talks about the 150 vehicles entering the site for the Friday prayers on a holiday peak period. It would probably be more precise to say that 150 vehicles enter the site during the busiest 1 hour leading up to those Friday prayers. So again, that's with the provision of a single service on the property, and again, with the fact that it was holiday traffic. Comment number 7, I touched on this a little bit already. It talks about the limited ITE data for mosques. The TIA conducted traffic counts at other facilities to determine the average vehicle occupancy. And, you know, I talked a little bit about that, how they compare to the size of the site. Since it's a rate, it's not a total number. It's not the total number of trips in and out of the site, not the total number of parking spaces occupied. We felt that proximity and environment was more important necessarily than matching all the facilities between the two sites. And what the data showed is that that is essentially true. The large site with the extensive parking and the smaller site in the context of a residential dwelling is the way it presents from the street, have roughly the same occupancy per vehicle. Comment number 8, the TIA states a maximum of 90 vehicles are anticipated to enter and exit the site on a typical Friday midday prayer service. Additional data as to how that was determined shall be provided. That was provided based on data provided from the client. He's looking at the previous operation of the mosque on the property and anticipating that congregation, if you will, is going to stay largely intact, so that the people that were going to the site in 22 were going to be the same people that were going there in 2024. At the April 3rd, 24 Planning Board hearing, testimony was provided that none of the amenity space would be utilized during scheduled prayers. Certainly, we are all in agreement with that. The primary prayers, when they're occurring, will be the only thing that's happening on the subject property. The masjid, the people who run the masjid will have control over the operations, and certainly it's going to be one thing at a time. It's not going to be all uses occupied and in use at once.
Yeah, and if I could just comment on that, I don't know if Mr. Fishinger or Mr. Cornell want us to provide some type of statement as to when those uses will be in service. Obviously, it's not going to be when ritual activities occur.
And just to clarify, that was the intent of this comment is, I understand that you're not going to have a basketball game at the same time as prayer, but then when are you using the basketball court, the running track, the other parts of the site?
That's fine. We can provide that.
The trip generation estimates for the entire facility should be provided for the weekday morning, evening, Saturday midday time periods based on the requested schedule of activities. Should include estimates for the classroom space, multipurpose hall, exercise area, and so on. To a degree, we have provided that already. It was included in the additional traffic study, I believe. Some testimony had been provided at the last hearing with regards to operations beyond those Friday prayer services, but we can fine tune that and resubmit for the board's consideration. Comment number 11, trip distribution. It appears from the information provided that the trip distribution for the site is based on the count data collected in April of '22. That is certainly correct. Additional information and testimony should be provided regarding the applicability of using a peak event distribution for a typical prayer service. Well, the people that go to church on Christmas are the same people that go to church on a regular Sunday. We have data at the site when it was operating as a mosque. I don't know that providing a projection based on population studies of the surrounding areas would give you anything more concrete than what we already have. Capacity analysis, and some of this is sort of restating the earlier comment, I think, about the additional peak periods. We've been through this extensively with CME and the county. We provided data at times of day and days of week, which we think reflect the peak periods for the mosque. It's up to the board to determine whether they feel that is sufficient or not. Number 13 talks about the queues again. Then it starts with the site plan-oriented comments. The first comment under parking. The plans indicate a parking requirement of 377 spaces calculated using 1 space per 3 occupants based on room occupancy. 377 spaces is more people than they have in the congregation. I went through this before, but the calculation based on the square footage of the assembly space is appropriate given the context here, as there's no defined seating. And when you use that calculation, you come up with a requirement of 113 parking spaces. We're providing 109 parking spaces, but for that critical Friday prayer service, there's going to be 2 sessions, so effectively it's going to operate as 218 parking spaces. To the extent that a variance is needed, that would be the justification for it, along with the fact that parking calculation still at 113 spaces includes those other uses like the gymnasium in the calculation, which takes up a significant portion of that requirement.
All right, and Mr. Stimmel, obviously, you're the planner in this application as well. I'm assuming you'll be covering that in your planning testimony as well.
Yes,
Okay.
we'll be revisiting the parking, I'm sure, when we get to the planning testimony. Comment number 2 under parking notes that the ITE parking generation manual has very limited parking data for mosques with an average parking rate of 20.38 spaces per 1,000 square feet. This results in a requirement of 905 parking spaces. Obviously, 900 parking spaces is well beyond anything we would reasonably ever expect to see associated with this congregation. They already hold their bigger events off campus, either at the high school or the War Memorial High School or the park, depending on weather conditions. 905 is far beyond what's going to be on this property. He acknowledges that the ITE data is based on smaller facilities. We don't feel that it's appropriate for the proposed use. Based on the analysis of the April 22 data, 180 vehicles were on site between 1:30 and 1:45 p.m. Additional testimony shall be provided how parking will be accommodated during peak events such as the one counted in April of '22, as 109 parking spaces are provided. Lost my place. So again, April 22 data, holiday traffic at the mosque with a single service. We anticipate that the traffic on a typical Friday afternoon will be much lower, and the site will be providing 2 Friday afternoon services, effectively splitting the demand between them. comment number 4.
Before you get to comment 4, let me just follow up on comment number 3 on parking. So the data that you collected on April 2022 was one of the major religious holidays in the Muslim religion. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right, and I know you read the transcript from the last hearing, but we've already committed to the fact that that type of event will not occur on this site. It will either occur at the Sayreville War Memorial, or it'll occur at a park. In fact, I think for that particular holiday, it's going to occur at the park. So, is that your understanding?
Understood, yes. I think I mentioned that, but in case I didn't, the larger events, the holidays, festivals, special occasions will be held off-site at the high school or the park.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question, please? So in April 2022, you had a large ceremony, service at the smaller facility. From the client, we'd like to hear, why would you not have it at your larger facility?
Why? Because, first of all, that was one of the recommendations of your staff. And secondly, that's something that, since the mosque has been closed, that's what we've been doing. I think it's Eid and one of the other holidays have occurred off-site. And we have committed to that. I believe we made that, certainly that commitment at the last hearing as well.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, may I have a question? Mr. Stimmel, you mentioned 113 parking spaces were needed in your view. The ordinance, I believe, requires 377, and the ITE 6th edition parking generation manual would require, I think, 905. So I don't understand how you calculate your 113.
And if I could further the question, is it industry standard to base your engineering on what a client tells you versus some kind of code, building code, or industry standard?
Certainly not.
Sorry, say that again, please. Certainly.
No, I think he's going to provide you with an answer.
Oh, I thought he said
Okay,
certainly
no,
something
no,
else.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. No, certainly not. I mentioned that right at the beginning. Typically, we rely on data published by the ITE in a publication called Trip Generation. It's on, I believe, the 11th edition now. We also rely on data published by the DOT for various types of land uses. The ITE data for mosques is limited to 2 sites, which were much smaller than the proposed facility. The DOT didn't have any published data for a mosque, so...
Can I ask you the size of the facility in the study?
Pardon?
In the ITE, the two cases you referenced,
Yes.
what were their sizes?
I don't have that number at my fingertips.
And be
It
curious
was
to know-
less than 10,000 square feet.
And we'd like to know how many parking spaces those two facilities had.
Well, I think, Mr. Stimmel, before you go further, when you're talking about the historical data, you're talking about historical data that's in the Institute of Transportation Engineers Manual,
Correct.
which is not necessarily applicable to a site in New Jersey per se, because that's a national publication. And secondly, you did do counts at other facilities in New Jersey that are operational. Did you not?
We, so first things first, I'll defend the ITE a little bit. You know, if you get 10 traffic studies for 10 different uses, I would say that 10 out of 10 are going to use that ITE data, except for the rare circumstance where you have something like this where they don't have a lot of data. Just looking at my notes, the ITE provides parking data in parking generation. They're 2 separate publications, Trip Generation and Parking Generation, which was updated in October of 23. The parking generation references a sample size of 3 sites with an average area of 4,700 square feet of floor space. So that has a parking requirement of 20.38 spaces per 1,000 square feet, and I think that's where the calculation of 905 comes in. The other number that I referenced was based on the Sayreville ordinance, and I'm having a hard time putting my finger on it right now because I've got about 200 pages of notes. Parking requirement for house of worship, 1 for each 3 seats. Where the specific amount of seating is undetermined, then 1 parking space shall be required for each 250 square feet of assemblage area. So there's not defined seating in the prayer areas, the congregation hall. When we had submitted an earlier version of the site plan, we had based the parking calculation, I believe correctly, off of that requirement for one space per 200 square 50 feet of assemblage area, plus the gymnasium, plus the office, and so on. And that's where the 113 came from. I think that the 300-some number is far beyond what the applicant's going to require. Better, of course, than the 900 number from the ITE data, but that's what that is based on. So separating that issue from the trip generation, we did have traffic data collected at the existing site when it was in operation. The size of the building is going to be a lot bigger, but the congregation is going to be the same. The congregation is anticipated to move from the old site to the new site. It's not a gas station, it's not a fast food. Nobody's going to decide to stop in here for Friday prayers because they opened a shiny new location. These are the people that are in the area. It's drawn from the surrounding area.
Now, I was just, again, for the purity of the record.
I did.
Thank you,
You're
Mr.
being
Chairman.
good.
Okay. I didn't mean to cut you off, Mr. Stemmel. So why don't you finish what you were saying? I'm sorry.
So that's how we arrived at the data we used in preparation of the study. We do have data collected at 2 other sites, which we could, the one is more of an apples to apples comparison. That was the larger of the 2 properties where we collected data. We could take a look at the trip generation and the parking demand for that and confer with Mr. Fishinger prior to the next meeting to see if he felt that that data was appropriate.
And one other point, that just so the record is clear, when you talk about the fact that traditionally there are no seats in a mosque, there are no seats in the mosque, is that correct?
That's my
All right.
understanding.
And in fact, the prayers occur on a prayer mat. So therefore, you're basing the parking calculation, the required number of parking spaces, is then based upon the square footage taking into consideration those prayer mats.
Yes.
Okay. Why don't we proceed? I know there's some other comments that Mr. Fishinger had.
I lost track. Do you know what number I was on?
I think we were, let's see, we were
4.
number 4.
Four under parking. 60 to 90 cars was based on information provided by the client. The capacity of 2 persons per car is slightly higher than the data collected at other sites, but assuming an occupancy of 1.85 persons per car, which was the average of the 2 sites where I collected data, at 60 to 90 vehicles equates to 111 to 167 persons. Number 5 under parking. The TIS assumes 90 vehicles in and 90 vehicles out during the Friday midday peak. Since 2 services are proposed, please provide justification on how the proposed 109-space parking lot will accommodate both Friday prayer sessions, especially during the 30-minute period between sessions when one is ending and the next is beginning. The services are relatively short. They're in the middle of the day. The half hour between sessions is expected to be more than enough to clear out the property. You know, I think this is a not uncommon situation at other houses of worship, churches and things where they have multiple services in a given day. The next comment, additional information or testimony should be provided regarding the tandem parking spaces under the building. The tandem parking is limited to 6 spaces in the underground parking area, so 3 pairs of 2 parking spaces. Those are intended for use. The interior spaces will be used by the imam and the mosque staff, so they will linger a little bit after the services is over, and those won't turn over. Site plan, internal circulation, comment 7. Sheets 9 and 10 of the site plans include vehicle turning templates for the site, including a passenger car, garbage truck, SU-30 delivery truck, and fire truck. We recommend that the turning plans be revised to eliminate overlapping paths, as it is difficult to review. We have no issue with making that revision, and we'll provide. Number 8, based on the information provided, it appears that the garbage truck and the SU-30 truck crossed the driveway center line to complete their maneuvers. That is true. That does occur. Obviously, the garbage truck and any deliveries to the site are going to be occurring outside of peak hours, essentially when the site is empty. We have the driveway configuration that we have based on a number of meetings with the county, as well as CME Associates. This truck encroachment with the exiting maneuver is going to occur on a very limited basis, and believe it's a better design choice to keep the driveways the way they are. And again, this is something that the county has given conditional approval to, and none of those conditions relate to the configuration of the driveways, I should add. Comment number 9, additional information and testimony should be provided regarding the likelihood of school buses or charter buses to be on the site, and the site layout should be redesigned accordingly to accommodate buses.
Well, all right. I guess I can comment on that point. Right now, we don't anticipate having any buses. Certainly, Mr. Fishinger, I guess we could have that conversation with you. If there's an area that we could designate as a drop-off area for any buses in the future, I'm sure we can probably provide that.
Comment number 10 relates to additional turning templates. We can provide that. Comment number 11 says the site plan should be revised to accommodate the left turn prohibition cited in the March 12th TIA update. A concrete island is recommended to discourage left turns out of the site at this location. We don't have any issue with providing it, obviously subject to county approval, so we need to get county buy-in on that driveway modification. Justification for the need for 2 driveways shall be provided. A pair of one-way driveways may be more appropriate for the proposed use. And again, and I know I've said this a dozen times, we've had a lot of meetings with the county. We were back and forth with the driveway configurations. We looked at, one entrance driveway, one exit driveway. We looked at limiting left turns out of the site. We looked at the deceleration lane. We looked at a plethora of options, and this is what ended up being proposed. We felt that the driveway configuration, and I believe the county concurred on this, was the best option to allow site traffic to disperse quickly, to promote safe and efficient access to all areas of the site, to improve circulation, and in the occasion that this would occur, to allow for a second access point in the case of construction or emergency situations. Comment number 13 talks about the connection between the sidewalk along Ernston Road and the front of the site. I think Mr. Sachs has already indicated that the client is willing to provide this, subject to county approval. Comment number 14 talks about monitors during the Friday services to direct traffic on site, and then goes on to mention also the police traffic control on site every Friday. So there's 2 separate groups there. There's the police traffic director, who would be a uniformed police officer directing traffic from the roadway. The second is the monitors on site directing people within the subject property as to where they can park, where there's parking available, where the lot is full, and so on. So the police in the roadway, mosque staff, or community members within the interior of the site.
All right, and Mr. Stemmel, I guess, of course, those monitors could be trained to obviously know what proper public safety would be with respect to the internal circulation. Is that correct?
Sure. I think, there's traffic glasses available for construction workers to direct traffic at construction sites. I'm sure there would be something available for this type of situation.
Okay,
Chairman, if I
so
may.
I believe you've covered Mr.
Chairman?
Fishinger's report. Is there anything else you need to add at this particular point, Mr. Stemmel?
With the understanding that the planning testimony will be separate and later, that's everything I wanted to say in terms of the traffic.
All right, Mr. Sachs, I have a question for your
Sure.
expert. You've got 180 spaces. Friday afternoon, I got a cop out front directing traffic. I get 140 people to come to the first one and 40 for the second one. What do we do?
Fair question. We've got 109 spaces proposed, just to clear it up for the sake of the record. We anticipate a relatively even distribution. It's just going to depend on what works best for people's schedules. But if the situation arises where we've got more people attending one service than the other, then there will have to be direction from inside the community to shift to one or the other.
And Mr. Chairman, let me just follow up on that point as well. We do have the availability of parking on the other, at the church, which is located, I think in Old Bridge, if I'm not mistaken, if necessary.
St. Bernadette's, up the hill? Okay, quite a walk.
Right. And that's something, we're gonna provide some type of letter from them indicating that that arrangement can occur. And reciprocally, they would be able to use our site if necessary during Christmas, Easter, whatever might be necessary.
Right. Any questions from the board, sir?
Yeah, specifically, the question was asked about, will police be used every Friday during the service? And
Yes.
I don't think that question was answered by your engineer, Mr. Stimmel?
Yes, that's my understanding. There will be police every Friday during those peak Friday afternoon services.
Expensive.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Silva, you just on question number 9, you indicated that you would provide access for buses to go through. Would that traffic pattern take away any parking places?
You're talking about, Mr. Paulson, you're talking about if we had a designated drop-off zone for
Right,
the
yeah.
parking? I don't know. But again, we don't anticipate having any buses coming to the site. St. Bernadette's is close enough that pedestrians will be able to access our site from their site.
Can we double check? Last testimony, you said there'd be shuttling from UES on the weekends when the school's closed. So what shuttle
No.
would be you using?
No, I don't, I think we spoke about the fact that there would be off-site services for the holidays. For Ramadan, I believe we spoke about that. Yes, for Ramadan, we may have to have parking off-site.
And shuttle over to this?
yeah, yeah.
So what type of, the question would be, where would you drop off peak? And the
Yeah,
bus-
we're gonna have
Can the
to-
bus navigate through the parking lot?
Yeah, we're going to have to look at the plan and see what kind of revisions we can make. Or, Mr. Khan, if you want to respond to it now?
I need to get on or?
You're still under oath.
Okay. Yeah, I think, like, first of all, I believe that was the biggest concern by the county as well when we were designing this thing, like what kind of vehicles are expected. And it is my understanding that we are not anticipating any buses. However, in the front, we have a room along the drive aisle that we can do a temporary pickup and drop off without sacrificing any parking. So if needed, we can provide temporary, short-term drop-off, pickup and drop-off.
Mr. Sachs, can we just please, I know this witness has already been sworn in and testified, but can we just identify who just spoke for the record and confirm that he understands he's still under oath?
I will. Mr. Sodillo, yes. That was Mr. Adnan Khan, who testified at the April 3rd, 2024 meeting. He's a licensed professional engineer. He's the project engineer who prepared the site plan. And Mr. Khan, just to follow up, and again, I think I told you were still under oath. You'll continue to be under oath for the duration of any of these hearings. We could provide some type of small detail on the site plan showing where that's located?
Yes, we can.
Any other questions from the
I
board?
have one other question. Mr. Silva, in your calculations, down the road, about a half mile down the road, at the intersection of Bordentown Avenue and Cheesequake Road, they just redesigned the intersection to accommodate the future truck traffic coming out of the 3 new warehouses on Cheesequake Road. Have you, in your calculations, included or anticipated any of that traffic volume at the intersection of Bordentown and Ernston Road?
I'm sorry, where was the location of the warehouse?
Okay, there are
All right, that's enough.
Okay, there were just 3 new warehouses built on Cheesequake Road. And
Cheesequake and
they just
Bordentown.
redesigned the intersection of Cheesequake and Bordentown Avenue to accommodate the trucks that are going to come out of that facility and obviously go up or down Bordentown Avenue. Have you included those calculations in your intersection at the Ernston Road?
We performed our latest traffic counts on March 1st, so about two months ago. Was the warehouse open at that time? because I contacted the zoning department in Sayreville and the zoning department in Old Bridge, and they told me that there were no new developments in planning or under construction which would impact traffic along Ernston Road in front of our site, and they were obviously familiar with
The
our
three
site.
warehouses that we're talking about are going to have a certificate of occupation within a month or so. They're built, they're ready to go, they're just waiting for the okay. So, of course you hadn't.
Right, and Mr. Chairman, just my knowledge of what probably was in the deliberations, I don't know if it was a zoning board application or a planning board application. Sounds like it may have been planning board, since you're all familiar with it. We're going to take a look at those traffic reports that were provided, because that usually indicates the distribution of how traffic is going to be distributed, where it's going to go, et cetera. So I appreciate your providing us with that information. We'll look into that. And if we can get copies of those reports, I'm sure Mr. Cornell can probably provide them for us, so.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
help me understand something. In your site plan, there's a parking analysis. And in that parking analysis, it says that 324 spaces were required for place of worship. And I believe that was based on one space for each 3 seats, and you indicate on there 973 seats. So you take 973, divide it by 3, and that gives you 324 spaces needed. That was on your site plan. So what's changed, and that's 113 now?
Nothing has changed. The earlier site plan referenced the calculation based on the square footage of the assembly hall, because the Sayreville ordinance states that where fixed seating is not provided, it should be based on 1 per 250 square feet based on the size of the assembly hall. So based on the review of the ordinance, I believe that's the appropriate standard to apply. And again, that takes into account the gym and the office and the other space within the building as well.
Well, on the parking analysis, and again, this is your site plan. This isn't a document that any of our experts generated. But this is on your site plan. You indicate 973 seats. What is that based on?
It's not my site plan, just to be clear. I'll give it to Mr. Khan.
The parking analysis that we did, like based on the ordinance says either, let me just read it. Place of worship, 1 space per each 250 square feet, or 1 space for each 3 seats, whichever is greater. So in our case, like, I mean, again, until we get the actual occupancy of the building from the fire marshal, we anticipate, like, based on the size of the assembly hall, you can probably have an occupancy close to 900 plus parishioners. So what we did is we took that higher number and then divided by 3, and we came up with 324 spaces.
Okay, so that was based on the anticipated occupancy of the worship area?
That is correct.
Okay, so why doesn't that apply? Why does 113 apply? Why are we now basing it off the square footage as opposed to the occupancy of the place of worship?
I may have a different version of the ordinance than Mr. Khan does. The text that I quoted, where the specific amount of seating is undetermined, then 1 parking space shall be required for each 250 square feet of assemblage area. So there's no fixed seating in the assembly hall for the place of worship. So that's why, in my professional opinion, I believe it's appropriate to use the requirement based on the square footage, based on the text of your ordinance.
So you're going to ignore the potential occupancy of the worship area and base it off of square footage? And this is occupancy based on your planner,
I'm the planner.
based upon your client's planner.
Based upon your application,
Yeah.
for clarity.
I understand what you're saying. The assembly hall has no fixed seating. Therefore, there's no seats. Where the specific amount of seating is undetermined, it's undetermined, then 1 parking space shall be required for each 250 square feet. That is, my professional opinion, the calculation that should be used.
Okay.
And setting aside the fact that there's only 300 people in the congregation, regardless of whether or not everyone attends on a given Friday.
So, Mr. Stimmel, just could we go back to my earlier question, because I still don't feel like I have a clear answer. do you base your engineering on a code or industry standard, or do you base it on what your client says, whether it's a religious use or a building or a store? Do you base it on what you're told will be the store customer base?
Again, I've answered this question several times now.
Just
I
yes
used
or
the
no.
best available data. In this case, the best available data, as there was no industry data, was the information regarding the operation on the subject property when it had been open in '22, and the data provided by the client as to what they expect the anticipated occupancy of the site to be.
And if so, there's no other cases you could have referenced in the entire country to base your data on? So it's just a general question.
We could look at other mosque sites. We did collect some data at other mosque sites, but the intention for that, to address a specific comment from the board's engineer, was to find out the occupancy of vehicles at those other mosque sites. We could go back and look at that data and try to parse that and come up with a correlation between the size of the assembly hall for those buildings and the size of the assembly hall for this building. But as I had said before, I don't believe that's entirely an accurate way to project the traffic for the site. I think part of the issue with it is that you're not talking about a typical business. You're not talking about a gas station or a restaurant. It's not going to be drawing traffic from the existing roadway. People that are coming here with a purpose. They're people that were going here in '22 because it was the closest available mosque where they could do their Friday prayers, and that is going to be largely the same. I mean, is there going to be some fluctuation in the congregation over 2 years? I'm sure there will be a little bit, but the thought on the applicant side, and I believe it to be accurate here, is that the congregation is the congregation. If and when this application is approved, the growth will be slow. It's not going to be like you open up a new fast food place and you've got a line of 50 cars out onto the state highway because it's the hot new thing. It just doesn't work that way.
I don't know.
Mr. Chairman?
It's a beautiful rendition. I would hope to see something like this is well used and well received by all the congregation, and people come from the other areas to come see this.
Well, yes, in theory, that's great. However, I think we can all accept and acknowledge the fact that there have been a number of mosques that have been built in surrounding towns over the last few years. For instance, Old Bridge recently had an approval for a new mosque. There's another one in South River. So, years ago, there weren't too many mosques, quite frankly, in central New Jersey. There was one in Piscataway. There was one in North Brunswick. There was one in South Brunswick. But over the last few years, there have been more mosques have been built. I think the point is that the congregants who go to the mosque or were going to the mosque back in 2022 before it closed down and are now going to this mosque, which is now located elsewhere in Sayreville, are going to be the same ones who are going to go to that mosque if this board approves this application when it's built. I mean, it's just like any other house of worship. And I think and I'll get in a second on that, but I think Mr. Stimmel has indicated that it is not a commercial use. It's not a fast food restaurant. It's not located on Route 9. It's not going to get passed by traffic. It's a house of worship. That's what it is, plain and simple. Mr. Khan, if you want to add anything?
Yeah, I just want to give my experience. Like, I've been involved in close to 15 mosques in New Jersey, and quite a few in Old Bridge, I think 2 or 3, which is next town over. Again, based on my experience, and again, I don't know how much it's applicable here, based on my experience, the mosques are started in a town because of necessity, because the closest mosque is like few miles away, and again, the parishioners are looking for convenience. So I would say, except for Friday, of course, people within the area might be coming to attend the Friday prayers, but 95% of the time, it's the residents because it's the closest to them. And again, if the congregation grows, and just like in Old Bridge, there are like three mosques, and I think 2 of them are still working for site plan approvals for 2 additional mosques. Because as the congregation grows, they understand the limitation of the mosque that they are going to, and then what they do is like they find a place and try to get an approval for a new mosque. So that's my experience based over like last 20 years.
John?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sachs, actually, I do think it is relevant for contextual purposes when you do bring up two examples of other mosques. So what I would ask, and I know you probably don't have this information available, but I really would, and I think we would all like to know the building sizes of the mosques that were used as example, the size of their membership, the parking capacity, and any amenities that they may have as well. That may provide some context for this application. I'd appreciate it.
Councilman, I think it's a good suggestion, and I was just talking to my traffic expert, and we will provide that for you.
Thank you. I have a second question. When the 2022 study was performed, while the mosque was still in operation, was there any data in reference to the amount of traffic from the parking that would cross over Ernston Road and onto Route 9, to the Route 9 direction? In other words, not traffic that would flow down to Ernston, down to Bordentown, but that traffic that would cross over and up to Route 9.
In terms of cars leaving our site and making a left?
Yes, correct.
Yes, that was counted in the 22 study.
Could you just remind me if you know what that number was?
The percentage was about 15 to 20 vehicles. I'd have to go back and look at the original counts to give you the number.
And what would that be representative of a percentage coming out for each service?
It was,
Is that about 30%?
no, 15 to 20% of cars made lefts out of the site
Okay,
driveway.
because I thought you said 15 or 20 cars. That's what I was asking. So I just wanted to clarify, is it percent or cars?
Percent.
Okay, thank you. And one last question. If you know, where's the nearest crosswalk on Ernston Road from, if they're coming and they're walking from St. Bernadette's?
I don't believe there is one. You'd probably have to go to the county, I would imagine, to get one approved at that location.
Is that something that the applicant would do?
Certainly.
Okay, thank you.
And I think if it came to the point where the sidewalk was connected, the sidewalk connection was provided, as some of the board members had commented on, and the board's traffic expert, I think at that point the county would probably want to see the crosswalk anyway.
Thank you.
Mr. Stimmel, just a few more questions. I understand how you're interpreting the ordinance, and I understand what the prospective occupancy is of the worship area, and this board has to look at not what the current congregation is, but how it could grow, what's going to happen in the future. My question to you is, you would agree with me, though, that if there's not enough parking at the site, and let's just say you do need 200 spaces, and there's only 109, and you have 150 cars that are trying to get into that site, you agree that that parking is going to have an issue on the traffic near the site, right? That lack of parking, correct?
I'm sorry?
No, you're good.
Oh,
Just
sorry.
keeping the noise down.
Chairman had his hand up. I thought he was telling me to.
No.
So I think there's two issues there. The parking lot's at capacity. The monitors that are in the parking lot are going to have to put up sandwich board or something equivalent by the driveway to show that the parking lot's closed, and I think the police traffic director would know about it. The applicant has agreed to move the major events, Eid and the other holidays off-site to the school or to the high school or to the park, which I think eliminates some of that concern. And then there's also the provision of off-site parking at St. Bernadette's with the reciprocal agreement that Mr. Sachs was talking about. So I think, between those ideas, I think it addresses the issue of the need for overflow parking. Nobody wants to create a safety situation, and we don't believe that we have. In fact, we think that the proposed parking supply will meet the demand under the majority of circumstances.
The 6th edition IT parking generation manual, do you find that authoritative?
Yes and no. If you have 100 data points, then certainly. If you have 2 or 3 data points, then less so.
Have you ever relied upon it in your expert capacity?
Oh, I had said before, the IT data, parking generation, trip generation, use it all the time. It's the basis for the majority of traffic studies out there. But, as with anything, it says that in one of the first pages of the book, it says that you have to use sound engineering judgment when applying the data, because not all data sets are created equal. So again, if you have 100 data points versus 2 or 3, you're on a lot more sound footing with 100.
And in the ordinance, the section that talks about 1 space for each 3 seats, do you interpret that to be 1 parking space per 3 people, assuming that there's 1 person per seat?
It says where the specific amount of seating is undetermined, so I don't take it that way. I take it to be based on seating. So if you're thinking of a Catholic church like I'm used to, you count the number of seats or count the number of pews and base the calculation that way.
Okay. The assumption is you're going to have 1 person in 1 seat?
Aside from infants, I would assume yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions for Mr. Stimmel. So in the 113 parking spaces that you mentioned, does that account for anticipated background growth for the next 5 years or 10 years?
The background growth that we were talking about relates to the volume of traffic along the street. In terms of the growth of the congregation, Mr. Khan just spoke about this a little bit, but it's anticipated that the congregation is essentially what it is. The growth is pretty limited. You know, people are born, people die, people move in and out of the area and so on, but it's not something that really draws beyond a fixed area. The demand, if the population, if the demographics in the area change such that there's need for additional mosque capacity, there will be another mosque at another location is the understanding. So, you know, the parking supply is sufficient for the use of the site based on our review of the application. If the size of the congregation were to double, it wouldn't likely mean that we would provide double the parking. It would mean that there would be another mosque created somewhere further down the road.
And my second question is, like you said, if you make an arrangement with St. Bernadette where your parishioners will be crossing the road and coming over, have you accounted that in your traffic study, how that'll stop the traffic from flowing on Unston Road?
Well, you know, again, I think it goes back to the police traffic director. I think they're going to be cognizant of people crossing the road. There were a few people crossing the road under those counts that I watched the video of from 22. They didn't really seem to have a problem with it. Yeah, there's a lot of traffic, certainly, but there were gaps in the traffic, and then if the traffic was stopped by the queue, they would just sort of squeak through. We don't certainly advocate jaywalking, but it was something that was observed under an existing condition.
Mr. Stimmel, just one follow-up, and I don't know, this could be directed to everyone. I don't know if you're going to be able to answer this, but is everyone who comes into worship have to have a prayer rug? No, okay.
That would not be a question for me.
Okay. Yeah.
No, they're not. Usually the prayer area is all carpeted with the prayer spaces marked.
It's not one parishioner worshiper needs a rug. What's the correlation as to?
Usually it's a carpet, wall-to-wall carpet with some, what do you call, architectural or religious design on it, designating a prayer space for each individual person, but it's a wall-to-wall carpet. It's a custom carpet that is like being kind of like laid.
Okay, so it's not.
Designate each space.
Okay, so it's not that everyone has to come in with their own prayer carpet. It's already in. Okay.
It's already in.
Understood. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
One second, go ahead.
Well, Mr. Chairman, just before we go on, because I know our traffic engineer has a lot of questions, I just want to
Okay.
clarify, if I may, Mr. Chairman, just a couple testimony items that were there, just for the record keeping purposes.
Be my guest.
One was, and I understand, and this is also to help with the board, I think we've talked about it, I think most of the board members understand now, but our ordinances provide for these places of worship 2 ways of calculating traffic, parking requirements. One is based on seating, and one is based on the square footage of the worship space. So what I understand, and this is where I just want to clarify the record, is that the calculations that the traffic expert has been testifying to when he came up with the 113 spaces is based upon the, not the number of seats, but the square footage of traffic spaces, correct? Being the requirement of 1 space for 250 square feet?
Correct.
Now, for my purposes, my question to follow up on that is, to get to the 113 spaces, what was the square footage you utilized for that calculation? Because I know there's been some back and forth as to the total square footage of worship space. And I just want to make sure the record's clear as what was the square footage utilized to calculate the 113 spaces.
I would have to go back and pull my notes for that. I don't have that number at my fingertips.
Okay. If we can just, Mr. Sachs, if we can have that information, because I think it's important to understand, because then the board will then understand what the square footage of the actual worship space is being considered for use when it came up with the parking calculations. Yes.
Yes. Can you clarify the ordinance for me? Is it seating, fixed seating, or seating?
It's just provides seating, so that,
So we have
sitting here,
So we're sitting here today, nothing's fixed. Do we base it on chairs that you could bring in? How, can you clarify it for everybody?
I would have to defer to our engineer as to whether or not that's considered fixed seating or just seating. My understanding is it's seating, so if, depending on even if it is folding chairs or moving chairs, it's based on the permitted seating, but I will defer to our engineer on answering that question.
Just for the record, I mean, the questions I had were based upon your site plan. And this is where I got very confused, because in the site plan, there was a parking analysis that you provided. And it did indicate there was going to be 973 seats. So I was trying to correlate what a seat meant as opposed to there's not being seats here. So that's why I'm confused when the traffic expert comes up and says, no, the real number is 113, because I was basing my questions off your very own parking analysis. So that's the disconnect I have. There's a potential occupancy of 973 people in the worship area. And the question is, what is the sufficient parking for that potential maximum occupancy?
And maybe I can respond to that. And maybe there's an error on the actual page 1 of the site plan, which is going to have to be corrected. But the testimony for consideration by this board is what Mr. Stimmel testified to today, that the parking calculation, because there are no seats in the mosque, all right, it has to be based on square footage. And we'll get that number, as Mr. Sordillo asked, as to how we calculated the 113.
I think it was 14,941 square
Sounds about
feet in
right.
the worship area. So I think that's where it comes from, but I'm not testifying.
Yes, that's it. 14,941.
Question for Mr. Khan. Can you describe the wall-to-wall carpet for us, please? There's architectural design in their carpet.
Yeah, let's say it's a carpet like this. So what it is like, again, everybody who's comes to the mosque for praying, they have to stand in a straight line. So you will see, sorry. So they have to stand in a straight line. So you will see the carpet like this, marked like about, I would say 4.5 feet long, and then there will be these lines, and then each section, I wouldn't say section, each row will be further marked with some kind of architectural feature, Islamic architectural feature, to designate each space so that a person can come and stand in there. So I would say it's about like 3 feet by 5 feet on an
The
average.
entire room have this carpet?
What is it?
Is the entire room carpet? You said wall-to-wall.
The prayer area, yes.
The prayer area.
Prayer area.
So how many of these architectural spaces are shown, or would be on the flooring?
It depends upon the length and width of the room.
You have it both, so we know the length
So
of the room,
in
right?
this-
Mr. Allegri, what we're going to provide for you is we're
Yeah,
going
we
to
can
give.
provide sample.
Let me finish. We're going to provide a layout, and we're going to show exactly where those designations will be so that you'll know exactly how many parishioners will be inside that ritual room.
So do you have an estimated number of architectural designs that you already,
We're going to provide that based upon the square footage of this ritual area, and we'll provide that for you.
so I guess that's maybe some of the issue everyone's having, right? You don't know how many you're going to have, but yet you have the engineering behind it completed already.
Well, no, we know how big the ritual area is. We know that and I don't want to use the term prayer mat because in older mosques, which aren't as modern as the one that's being proposed, everybody would bring in their own prayer mat. And usually they're probably 3 by 5, 3 by 6.
And I think the architecture,
We can't have people talking.
I think the architectural plan,
Hey, listen, all I'm asking you is to be respectful. That's all. We can't hear if you're talking. Thank you.
Apologize. Go ahead.
yeah, the architecture plan, if I remember right, it shows a layout of the prayer area with those rectangles marked on the plan, which is pretty much a space. That's how they come up with this 900 and change.
So it's on your architectural plan?
I believe.
I believe it is, yes. And if it's not, we'll provide it for you.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up, I did have one second clarification point, because during the testimony between last meeting and this meeting, and I just need to clarify it for my purposes, for creating the record and for the future resolution, there was testimony that for certain large events and holidays, there was going to be off-site parking, that they were going to shuttle the individuals and worshipers in and shuttle them out potentially. But then I believe tonight there was some testimony that for large events, they're actually going to be holding the events off-site at the, so I'm confused which is which, and I think we need to have some clarification on that.
I think it's, by the way, Mr. Sardillo, we got the transcript just today or yesterday from the last hearing. My recollection, and I'll provide that for you, but my recollection is that for the 2 or 3 major holidays, maybe 4 major holidays, everything is off-site. It would be at the park. Ramadan would be at this particular site, and that's where you could get a larger attendance, and that's where potentially we would be utilizing St. Bernadette's or having shuttle buses if there's another site that we need to do. But I will look in the transcript and get you the exact testimony as to that.
All right. Thank you. While we're on that subject, I'll start with that question. Would you be amenable to providing some sort of a traffic management plan, so there's sort of a guideline as to say, on this holiday, this is what we plan to do, and just so that there's something that, whether it's the zoning department or the police department, they have something they can rely on and say, okay, on Ramadan, this is supposed to happen. On this holiday, that's supposed to happen.
Yes.
And going back one discussion, am I correct that you said you were going to provide a plan? I don't believe it's shown on the architectural plans, but a layout that shows roughly how much space each member takes for prayer and work out the math to give us a number. So then we can base the occupancy of the building or the parking requirements along that information.
Yeah, Mr. Fischinger will provide that.
Okay. And I'm going to go back through my memo, and I'll skip over the stuff that Mr. Stimmel has addressed or the board members have already asked for. Going back to the beginning under the traffic counts, Bill, I was a little unclear. Were you agreeable to doing an ATR count or something to establish the typical commuter peak hours for Ernst Road, or was that something you're not agreeing to do?
Well, we're agreeable to a lot of things. We've done a lot of traffic counts in support of this application. I will spend all of my clients' money if you let me. We believe the data provided addresses the concerns between the different counts we provided and the data from the DOT. Ultimately, as I said, if the board requires it, we'll do the ATR data.
And for the board's information, the reason I'm asking for that is not so much for the Friday afternoon facility. I'm in general agreement with the volumes that Mr. Stimmel has provided. My concern is the site is open during typical rush hour Monday through Friday. That may not be for prayer service, but there's still a basketball court, a running track, other amenities that presumably will generate some traffic. At this point, I don't know how much. And presumably Ernst Road is going to be at its busiest at typical rush hour on a 5:30 on a Wednesday or whatnot. So my concern is not so much that it's the busiest hour for the mosque, but my concern is if you take the busiest hour for Ernst Road and put whatever traffic this site is expected to generate on top of it, will the driveway still work? Will Ernst Road still operate effectively? When we have an office building or a residential, something that Typically, an office building peaks at the same time the road does, so we can do one set of counts. In this case, the site and the road don't peak at the same time. That's why I want to see when the road is going to peak. And if you want to do them counts manually or cameras or road tubes, the method, as long as it's a typical traffic engineering method, I don't care. I'm thinking road tubes are probably the most cost effective, but that's for you to decide.
Yeah, I know one of the members of the public seemed to be a fan of the road tubes from reading the transcript. We'll take a look at it. We'll provide 7 days of ATR data with a directional split.
That would probably settle the issue one way or the other. And I said, whether it's road tubes or cameras or radar, as long as it's, they're all typical. It may make more sense to put a camera out for a week than a road tube.
We'll provide the data, means to be determined, but we'll have it ready and submit it to the board and Mr. Fishinger for review.
And then you said you were able to go back to look at your video counts from '22. Is that something you can provide to the board, a download link or something to that video?
Somebody is probably going to need to help me with the technical side of it, but I think we can do it. The file's pretty big, so it's difficult to email, but
I'm sure
Dropbox or
between,
something.
my office does camera counts all the time. I'm sure between us we can work it out.
Yeah, sure.
Skipping up, I think number 5, it sounds like there were some warehouses that the board members brought up. It sound like you already agreed to look into that.
Yes.
Then I want to talk about, the next thing I wanted to talk about is the whole idea of 2 prayer services on Friday. How long do you expect it to take for the parking lot to flip over? My concern is, in that half-hour period, the 90 cars you have coming for the first service leaving and the 90 cars coming in for the second, they're not all going to magically appear and disappear at once. I'm assuming some people are going to walk out of the first prayer service, get in their car and drive away immediately, and some others might take a few minutes. Either they're going to be chatting with friends outside or stop, or not necessarily talking to someone else at the facility. Do you have any information on how long that turnover will take? Because if you have 90 cars leaving and 90 cars coming in within a half an hour, how do all of them park on site with only 109 spaces?
Yeah, I mean, we understand the concern there from reviewing the video data at the site in '22, which obviously was a larger volume and the layout was not optimal. I wouldn't say it took about 15 minutes for traffic to disperse from the service. You had a few stragglers, let's say, but the majority of people were out of there pretty quickly. I would imagine ready to resume their day. So we can go back and look at that and tighten that number up. Again, it's not going to be a direct apples to apples because the site layout is different and there's higher occupancy at that single holiday service than there will be on a typical Friday. But it should at least give the board a good understanding. We could possibly look at how long it takes to get 90 cars, let's say, out of the driveway and make that the number.
And I won't get into the technical details because honestly, Bill, you're probably the only other person in this room that understands this. After that review, I would ask you to review the peak hour factors in your analysis because I'm concerned with if all the traffic's moving in that shortened period, the peak hour factors you're using may not be appropriate. And very quickly, the peak hour factor is a measure of how condensed within that hour cars show up or leave. If all of them show up in one 15-minute interval, that peak hour factor is different than if they're evenly spread across the hour. My concern is it might be closer to 0.5 or than 0.98.
We can take a look at that, sure.
And Mr. Fishinger, one other point as well. It's a little bit easier for a house of worship to monitor and to direct people to do something if it needs to be done versus on a commercial site or a retail site where you can't tell someone, you know, you have to leave. I mean, obviously, it's going to be Friday. It's going to be, probably people are going to come to the same service every Friday. Either they're going to go to the first, they're going to go to the second, but they're going to be instructed to exit the site when the service is over, so.
Okay. Then moving on to the police, and thank you for clarifying, they're going to be there every Friday. I don't believe you said how many officers, and my concern with that is, will you have an officer at each driveway or one officer that's monitoring both driveways? How is that intended to work?
One each driveway. I'm told one each driveway.
And when you're in your discussions with the county about the potential of a one-way couple of, one driveway in, one driveway out, were they aware of the provisions for police? My concern being it might make more sense if a police officer is controlling traffic at the driveway, that all the cars are coming out at one point and are controlled by one officer. Was that part of that discussion?
My recollection is yes, and the engineer agreed with me. They were aware of the police traffic directors.
And you're agreeing to two officers during,
One at each driveway.
one at
yes.
each driveway?
Yep.
And I believe the majority of the site plan comments seemed relatively consistent. I did want to just point out with regard to buses, I'm not worried. My concern is you design the site, you build the site once, it lasts for hopefully 50-plus years. If something changes, I don't want to find out that you can't get a bus on site for later on. This is a community facility with various amenities. I'm recommending to the board that for flexibility in the future, that some sort of bus be allowed to get on site. I'm assuming now you're not holding basketball games in the basketball court, but 20 years from now, maybe you are. So it's just something to consider, that I'm not asking you to put a tractor trailer through here, that's not realistic, but a school bus or a bus should be. It's not so much that you have to have one, I just don't want it to cause a design issue later on. Those are my primary questions, Mr. Chairman. A lot of it was covered by the board when they asked their questions.
Yeah, I have a question about when you have the officers at the two driveways exiting the facility. Apparently, you're saying they're not going to be able to make a left-hand turn, which means they will be making a right towards Bordentown Avenue. So you're correct?
At the west, wait, turned around. At the east driveway, it'll be full movement in, full movement out. Lefts and rights in, lefts and rights out. At the west driveway, the one closer to Bordentown, you'll be allowed to make lefts and rights in, but only rights out.
Okay, so you're going to have officers at both those driveways when people are exiting, correct?
Correct.
So are they going to be stopping the traffic coming from Route 9 down Ernston Road towards Bordentown to let everyone out of the facility at that point from both driveways?
I would not want to tell them how to do their jobs. They're going to direct traffic the way that
Okay.
they feel
I'm
is
just saying
best.
that I drive the road, and it's very difficult. Not a lot of people are courteous to let you just pull out onto Ernston Road when you're coming down the road. So I would assume they're going to have to stop the traffic to let people exit out of the facility onto Ernston Road. How many cars do you think you can have from the facility to the corner of Bordentown? Did anyone ever take a study of that?
It's about 500 feet from the eastern site driveway to where Bordentown Road widens out. So that's about 25 cars, and then it's maybe another 200 feet from there to the light where you have the 2 or 3 lane section. So you could fit maybe another 25 or 30 there. So you're somewhere in the neighborhood of 45, 50 cars, I would say. Haven't counted it.
all right, let's keep it down. You're gonna have your chance in a second.
That's assuming that the cars split lanes, correct? I'm sorry. Okay. Right. So that's assuming that the cars, when they exit, are not all going in the same direction, because there's 2 lanes going straight, or you can make a right, and then there's 1 lane that makes a left. So
Right.
you'd be splitting lanes there, correct? So you splitting up the traffic exiting to go towards Bordentown to the intersection.
Right, when we did the traffic study, we looked at the counts at Bordentown and assumed that the distribution of traffic leaving the site would follow the distribution of lefts, throughs, and rights as you approach Bordentown. So that's how we distributed the site traffic there.
Okay. So the police officers will then allow some of the cars exiting to make lefts out of the facility, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
And again, it would be if their experience and understanding of the situation permits it. If for whatever reason at a certain date or a certain time they say can't make lefts out today, then they would direct the people accordingly.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
This application was presented to us as requiring a variance of a required 377 parking spaces to a proposed 109 parking spaces. Based upon the testimony of their traffic expert, that now has gone down from 377 spaces required to 113. That's a very significant drop in the number of spaces. I believe we as a board need to know what the ordinance requires, if there's any interpretation or whatnot. What is the actual number of required parking spaces so that we can consider that in whether to grant a variance? And I don't know if our professionals have any input into that. I mean, I read it and I interpret 1 space for each 3 seats to mean 1 parking space for every 3 adults. But that's just my interpretation. I'd like to know if our professionals have any view on what is the required number of parking spaces for this application.
Mr. Chairman, I can address that. Our office was of the opinion that the standards that you have are not appropriate for this use. 1 space per 3 seats is not appropriate since they don't have seats. 1 space per 250 square feet is not appropriate for this type of use based upon the prayer services that they utilize. What has been done in other towns and other applications that our office has been involved with has been occupancy. So we presented that to the applicant, indicating we felt it more appropriate that the occupancy of your prayer area be utilized with that 1 space per 3 calculation. The occupancy numbers were generated, I believe, by the architect. There was a plan submitted that indicated 973 occupants in the 3 prayer areas. So that's what triggered the 300 spaces that are shown on the plan. It was based on concerns raised by our office because we felt the ordinance that you have was not written for this type of application. The ordinance does allow the borough to go through and provide alternate standards for parking if we feel what's there is not appropriate.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
just a quick question, a couple questions. With the traffic study, I think it would be important also with those warehouses to do the study to the warehouses too, because those trucks coming off of Route 9, I think are going to go right down Ernston Road and make that left onto Bordentown. So I think it would be important to make sure it's not just leaving the warehouses, but how those trucks will be getting to the warehouses.
Typically, when you contact the municipality to find out about other area projects, specifically those which have traffic studies, what you do is you look at the traffic figures that are in those reports, and assuming they make sense, you overlay them on the traffic for your study area. So hopefully, when we pull those reports, they'll show X number of trips going eastbound, Y number of trips going westbound on Ernston Road, and we add that to our study. So it'll include the traffic going across our site frontage and going straight or left or right at the intersection. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I just want to make sure that would be covered there. Additionally, I know you're kind of basing it on square footage of the prayer halls for parking spaces. Just in regards to the basketball court, I know we mentioned with churches a lot of times, especially special services, they do overflow, and overflow can happen into the gym area. So and I'm not familiar with how the services are handled, is the basketball court a potential area for?
No. Cannot be used. Cannot be used for any ritual activities. The only thing that can be used for ritual activities would be the prayer hall. And we'll agree to a condition on that as well.
Okay. And then last is, we mentioned a couple times where as a mosque gets full capacity, then another mosque is built. I think I would like to know is when that, you mentioned Old Bridge, and you've been involved with a couple of the Old Bridge, what was their capacity and what was their census at that point? So are we talking that they were at 300 people, but only 300 people fit in the prayer room? So that's why it expanded, and I think it would be important, if you can, to get that information.
Yeah, we're gonna provide some more detailed information about some of the mosques that we studied. If we feel we need to expand that search, we'll do that as well to give the board a comfort level.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Stemmel, having historical data of the same use on the same site is certainly valuable in a board evaluating an application. However, I think there's some additional facts that the board needs and the public needs in order to ensure that it's an apples to apples comparison as opposed to an apples to oranges comparison. Looking back at the 2022 traffic study that was done, we're presenting those numbers as a basis for projected traffic going forward. However, are you aware of what the total amount of sanctuary or ritual area was in the building that was being used at the time the 2022 traffic study was done?
My microphone, sorry. It was obviously much smaller. The question came up earlier. I believe we had responded to that, but I'm not certain. The sanctuary area in the facility as it stands now, when it was open, do we have that square footage? The 216 Ernston?
I think I can answer the question, because
it's much smaller.
Well,
So
I understand it's much smaller. I can look at that picture and I can see what's existing there. But my question is, and it's not, and I could also look and figure out what the size of the building is. My question for the board members and the public is, within that building, what's the sanctuary space that's being provided for ritual?
Yeah, I can answer that question, Mr. Pullman, because I was involved in a prior lawsuit involving the shutdown of that facility. So the original mosque was a law office.
Yeah.
All right. There was an outdoor structure that was built that was utilized for prayer services, and they were also actually conducting ritual activities outside as well. The exact square footage I couldn't tell you offhand, but it was certainly much smaller than this particular site that's being proposed. But there was a lot of spillover activity outside, and all of those structures obviously were demolished and removed.
Do we also know, for purposes of analyzing the 2022 traffic study data, the amount of the occupancy of the ritual space, whether both exterior or interior? I don't know. I would presume that during our winter, we're not in Florida, that during the winter months here, that everybody had to at least be inside, if not a heated tent. Do we know how much occupancy we had when that traffic study is being done, so that the board members have an opportunity to compare those numbers to the current proposal within the site plan and application?
I could make a projection based on the data collected at other sites for vehicle occupancy. The resolution of the video and the angle at which the video was taken probably wouldn't allow me to pinpoint the number of people in each of the cars. So I could give you an approximation. The client may have attendance information, for lack of a better term. And if it's available, we'd certainly provide it.
Yeah, I think it's important that in order to, because again, historical data is great, and when you have a prior site that was being used for the same purpose, that data is valuable. But to ensure that it's processed correctly and used correctly, we need to know how does the square footage of that sanctuary or ritual space compare to what's being proposed, and also, what was the realistic occupancy of that space compared to what's proposed. Because, ultimately, the applicant as well as council have articulated that, the basketball court and the kitchen aren't going to be used for ritual. But there certainly is a significant amount of ritual space. And so to compare that very valuable 2022 data to what's being proposed, I think the board needs to know what occupancy was at that 2022 time. So if you could provide that, that would be very helpful to the board.
Anything else, Mr. Sachs?
Mr. Chairman, I don't. Certainly, our witnesses are available for any public questioning. Yeah, that concludes our presentation for this evening. Obviously, we know we're going to have to come back. We're going to have to provide a good deal of additional information as to traffic, which we're certainly willing to provide. And we certainly have our planning testimony as well, which we'll entertain at a future date as well.
Anybody on the board have anything else before I open to the public?
Just actually, maybe clarification from the last meeting on actual prayer times throughout the day. We'd like to hear from the applicant.
Well, that's all in testimony.
I think that was on the record from the last hearing.
Yeah, but it quite differs from what you have in your application, and I think times you do adjust based on the moon, correct? So as the moon is closer or further, you have times that may go later than what you have.
Actually, I think what we can provide is we probably can provide an annual calendar, because that's based on meteorological, and we'll provide that for you, Mr. Allegra. That's not a problem.
We're going to hard stop at 10:30 anyway. Good. Anybody else?
Court reporter might need a 5-minute break because I think her
All right.
fingers are about to fall
Okay.
off. So,
All right. It's 9:30, 9:35. We're going to start up. 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Excuse me, everyone, while the public's going to now, we're first having the Township Planner for Old Bridge be the first one to ask their questions, but as we invite everybody up to ask their questions of the professional who testified tonight, I just want to remind a few things. One, this is not the public comment section, this is still the question. So the questions need to be of the witness and this testimony that he gave this evening. You will be provided a time to provide your own comments, your own opinions as to this application at a later time. That occurs at the end of the application, but you are at this point allowed to provide questions to the witnesses that are here and provide a testimony. Tonight we had the traffic engineer and we did have some testimony from their general engineers. You could ask those questions relating to the testimony that was provided. Second, for record-keeping purposes, when you come up to the mic, can you please state your full name and spell it for the court reporter, as well as provide your address. That will help keep the record clean and make sure that your comments are fully being taken into account and kept in the record. So once again, when you get up, the chairman will invite people up as taking everyone get a chance to get up here and taking turns. And when you get up, please give your full name, you spell it for the court reporter's purposes, and provide your address. Thank you. Ma'am, go ahead.
Veena Savant, Planning Director, Old Bridge Township. Question. So tonight I've been hearing, and especially from the last meeting, I heard that there are currently, the mosque has 100 patrons. And I don't remember the exact number, but this is what Mr. Khan had testified. The congregation is roughly 300. And at the last meeting, I had brought it up that the house of worship, the prayer hall itself, based on building code, has a capacity of 667 people. I don't know where the 900 came from. I'll stick to the 667. What I fail to understand is, if the house of worship can accommodate 667 patrons at one time, then why would 109 parking spaces be adequate to address that much crowd? And I just can't understand, because as a planner, when you plan for the future. You're planning for, you're designing a building that can accommodate much more patrons. So then why would you not provide the services like the parking for that many people? And if you don't have the adequate land to provide that, why wouldn't you shrink the house of worship? I kept hearing that the congregation will not grow. I kept hearing Old Bridge, and I kept hearing that there are houses of worship in Old Bridge that are currently being worked on. Yes, there are. There is a house of worship on Route 35 where the engineer is working with us. That was approved 10 years ago and has expanded. But that's Route 35, it's not Ernston Road, that's a state highway. So something to be noted. The house of worship on Morristown Road, I don't even know if at this point is a valid application. It was adjourned multiple times. I would like the applicant to reach out to the planning office and work with us to get the data. There is a problem I'm having with a facility on Spring Valley Road, which has gone through expansion over years, does not have the capacity to hold that many cars, and I have been issuing notices of violation. So for me, it's very hard to believe that a congregation will not grow. Let's accept that it might grow over a period of time and then address any site issues that may be there. So I don't understand, and the question is, Why are you so confident that the congregation will not grow? And if it's not going to grow, then why is the building or the house of worship area, the prayer hall, 10,000 square feet? Why can't it be reduced?
Is that the question? Why it can't be reduced? Well, I think I can respond to Ms. Sawant. This is the application that is in front of this board this evening, and was in front of the board on April 3rd. I appreciate Ms. Sawant's comments, because that's primarily what it were comments. But Mr. Stimmel, if you want to address and I think you have several times this evening addressed the issue of how you determine what the parking calculation should be, certainly you can give Ms. Sawant the benefit of your answer.
Sure. I think the first thing that needs to be reiterated is that the application has this sanctuary area, the worship hall, it has the classrooms, it has the basketball court, et cetera. But the applicant's been clear all along that it's only going to be the sanctuary area that's in use during those prayer services. So I think right there, that reduces the occupancy of the building. We have looked at the parking calculations in the ordinance. Mr. Cornell and some of the board members took a slightly different tack on it, but we feel that applying the standard based on the square footage of the congregation hall is more appropriate than the per person occupancy, the ITE data, the number of seats, as it were. So we believe that the parking provided is appropriate for the use under the majority of circumstances. The larger events, the applicant has already stipulated, would be moved off-site. We're providing two services, so it effectively doubles the parking provided on the subject property. And the applicant, as I understand it, has in place a reciprocal agreement with St. Bernadette's Church on the other side of Ernston Road to use their parking when they're not using it, and vice versa. So for all those reasons, we believe that the parking supply is appropriate. Certainly, we wouldn't want to provide parking beyond what we believe is necessary, because when you create a parking space, it's there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if you use it for a few hours on Friday for the worship services, it's there radiating heat the rest of the week and causing storm runoff. So there's a danger to having too many parking spaces too.
Mr. Stimmel, I think the capacity I was talking about is not the capacity to include the accessory uses. I did not mention the gym, the multipurpose room, or any of the other amenities. I was strictly talking about the prayer hall. The prayer hall can accommodate 600 plus people, and I'm only talking about that. I do understand that RLUIPA covers the other accessory uses, so I'm strictly focusing on the house of worship. And again, just a comment, when you reach out to the church for Old Bridge Township, I would love to be a part of it, the conversation. Because I am not sure if the church has adequate parking either.
I don't have any response to Ms. Sawant.
Thank you, board. Thank you for your time. I'll be back for the planner. Thanks.
Thank you very much for coming. All right, spell your name, go to the mic, 3 minutes.
Don Scarano, Frederick Place, Scarano. Frederick Place, that's good enough. Thank you.
Terrible.
So I got a quick question. I ain't no slick talking lawyer or engineer or whatever, but common sense, 14,941 square feet. You got 9 square feet. You got a 4.5 by 2 foot. You're in this 14,941 square foot place. If you divide that by 9 square, you can fit 1,660 people in that place. That's all I want to say. That's future growth. Because if you have people come in, they're not turning them back. So we need to look at future growth, which is going to be important, because anybody can build anything. But if we're not going to look at the future, screw the people that live there. Let's just give everybody what they want. And I'm not against you guys at all. It's not. I don't care if it's a Catholic church. It's the same thing.
chair, please. Yo, through the chair. Through the chair, all right?
Chair is here, no disrespect, guys. You have your religion, Catholics have their religion. This is not a place. It's gonna be a nightmare for the people that live here. If you wanna put in your policy, anything over 300, I'll take a fine. Be my guest. Take accountability. Stop being so sad,
Name, address, spell your name.
Nikki, Nikki, Voccio, Voccio. I live at 12 Dunlap Drive in Parlin, New Jersey. So to the board, I want to ask the question, because we can't do any testimony. Are you actually going to be able to accept their proposed parking because they don't have actual seats but prayer places instead? Is that something you're willing to accept rationally?
Mr. Chair, I can speak to that. Yeah, our ordinance provides for that. It does allow for a calculation of parking based upon situations where seating is not provided for.
So let me ask you a question. If
Well,
there's a club.
let me just finish the response. And also, our board engineer also advised that there's also another methodology of calculating parking requirements based upon occupancy. So the board hasn't accepted any specific methodology yet. I'm just advising that the ordinance provides for multiple ways of handling it, and our board engineer had also testified to an alternate way of calculating what the parking demand is. But in any instance, from what we've heard in testimony so far, it will require a variance, and that's something the board will have to consider.
So in comparison, if anybody's been to the city in their entire life and has gone to a club, the Palladium, let's say, there is 0 seats in there, none. So but you would have to accommodate the parking spots for the hundreds of people that were gonna go in there and dance. It's just common sense that you would have to accommodate for the amount of people that are going to be there, whether there's a physical seat or a space that they're going to take up. Just making sure that's noted. Secondly, I mentioned this last time, Masjid Al-Wali in Edison. How is this not being used as a comparison? It's really close to us. On top of that, it's 18,500 square feet. That's half of what they're proposing here. I don't understand why common sense is not to just double what's going on over there as a comparison instead of using the current numbers that they're using, which is a 15,000 square foot mosque and an 11,000 square foot mosque. So, Mr. Sachs, I'm talking. I'd like to be acknowledged while I'm asking you a question. So the question is, why are you comparing a mosque that is a fourth of the size of this one and a third of the size of this one instead of using double of what half of the size of the one is in Edison?
Well, again, we utilized the data for the East Brunswick Mosque, which is very close by, and also the, what was the other mosque?
It's not comparable.
In Somerset. We did not look at the Edison Mosque. I mean, certainly we could look at it. There are a number of mosques in the area. Some of them are larger, some of them are smaller, some of them are located in different types of neighborhoods. We felt that, and by the way, I have particular knowledge of the East Brunswick Mosque. All right, I live there, and I'm also been the township attorney in East Brunswick for 27 years. That is also in a residential neighborhood quite similar to this one. So, but in any event,
Is that
you know,
11,000 square feet?
certainly we're willing to, if there's other mosques that we need to look at to provide data, and I think Mr. Fissinger has asked us to provide that, we're certainly willing to do that.
So let me ask the board, if there is a mosque that's half the square footage of this one, I did call there, I did ask the questions, how many parking spaces? They started out with 50 and then had to add 100 more because they needed 150 spots for an 18,750 square foot mosque. So if that's not comparable to need 150 for half the amount of people that are attending, half the amount of square footage, then I would use that as a decent comparable to how many spaces are going to be needed for double the amount of space. Thank you. One more question, and then I'm done. Let me ask you a question to all of you on the board. If you were purchasing a home that had train tracks in the backyard, would you accept the schedule of how many times the train would run in the backyard for the current amount of 1,500 passengers? Or would you demand to know the schedule for 44,000 passengers, which would be the actual amount of passengers while you were there in the home? It's the same exact thing here. We can talk until we're blue in the face after receiving numbers for traffic regarding the current mosque or nearby mosques, but can someone give us real numbers based on the traffic that would impact the area for the 44,000 square foot building that is actually being proposed? Thank you.
State your name, your address, and spell your name, please.
Thank you very much. Drew Weingarth, Weingarth. I do live in East Brunswick, New Jersey. I did have the pleasure of talking in front of you last time. Again, I thank everyone for their time and service. Again, 08859 is the zip code for Parlin, New Jersey. And there's the Saraville section of Parlin and the Old Bridge section of Parlin, and this applicant is in front of Saraville. And 08859, Parlin is a beautiful hybrid between the two. And I grew up in Madison Park and have the great privilege and pleasure of growing up there. For clarification questions, please, to the applicant. For the traffic study, did you, per the number of trips, did you specifically say the types of vehicles that were part of that?
It's included in the data and the analysis. It's not specifically called out in the report, but the trucks, let's say, were counted and included in the analysis. Off the top of my head, and I'd have to go back and confirm, I believe it came out to be roughly 4% along Ernston Road, heavy truck traffic.
Thank you, and that was actually what I was going to take away from the distinction between the type of vehicles was going to be the trucks. I think this was alluded to, but in forward thinking, it was stated that there was no certificate of occupancy for what is being called the Arsenal project on Cheesequake Road, and which intersects with Minnesink in Saraville. The warehouses there the trucks are not fully coming from that facility yet. So I'm asking nicely to please consider that moving forward, especially since, as it was stated, that the intersection of Cheesequake Road and Bordentown Avenue, that intersection was just recently done, recognizing that Bordentown Avenue is a Middlesex County road, but it was just redone. And if you're on Cheesequake Road wanting to make a left-hand turn onto Bordentown Avenue, the traffic light does have a left-hand turn signal, left-hand turn on green, whereas the other side of Cheesequake does not. So that, of course, favors the truck, will help the trucks coming from that facility making a left onto Bordentown Avenue, going towards Bordentown Avenue and Ernston Road, which would then go right past where the mosque is going to be if they wanted to go on Route 9. Just to point that out. Thank you. The next clarification question for the applicant was, I do believe you made reference to the mosque in East Brunswick. Can you please state again which mosque in East Brunswick are you referring to?
Yeah, Mr. Weingarth, it's the mosque on Dunham's Corner Road is the one we analyzed.
And that's what I thought. I do believe there are two mosques in East Brunswick.
There are.
And there is one on
There's
New
one
Brunswick
on
Ave?
Correct. There's one on New Brunswick Avenue, which is under construction.
Correct. Oh, so you're saying that, I'm sorry, you're saying that it's under construction and it's not open yet?
Not open yet.
Thank you for that. And it's near Ruse Lane, if I remember correctly. If it's going to be used as comparison, that mosque, it is in a unique situation in a more, I would think I would compare the mosque on Ruse Lane, on New Brunswick Avenue, more in relationship than the one off of New Dunham's Road based on, for the board's consideration. And it's more of a, again, it's more, comparisons are important, and again, we don't want apples to oranges, but if you were to compare in East Brunswick, I would compare the one on New Brunswick Avenue more than the one on Dunham's Corner Road. Again, I thank you all for your time and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am? You're it. Man with the hat next.
Hi, Carol Esposito, 6 Villanova Road, Parlin.
Spell
At
your
the
name,
last-
please.
Excuse me?
Spell your name, please.
Esposito.
Thank you.
At the last meeting, Mr. Sachs stated the hours of operation are 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. At other times, he said 8:30 p.m. Tonight, the times were stated as 6 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. At 8:30 p.m., is that the beginning of the last prayer service, or is that when the building's closed?
I think my recollection at the last hearing was, I think we said all activities would cease by that last service, which again is based seasonally, but it's around 8:30? Okay,
Is that the beginning of the service or end
No.
of the service?
the end. Yeah. It depends on the time of the year, but generally it would be.
Okay, so based on the times of the year, in March and April of 2024, prayer times begin at 5:10 a.m. and end approximately 8:50 p.m. or 9 p.m., with prayers beginning as early as 3:48 a.m. in June, all of May, June, July, August, September, half of October, most of November, December, January, February, and March of 2025, prayer times begin before 6 a.m. And the evening prayers in March, April, May, June, July, August, and most of September would begin after 8 p.m. So I'm trying to understand the prayer times and your hours of operation.
Mr. Chairman, if I may ask, what time is prayer time today?
The morning prayer is about 5:15, and the last prayer evening is 9:15 p.m.
So according to my paperwork here, morning prayer this morning would have been 4:31 a.m., and the last prayer would have been 9:19. I have a copy of this if anyone on the board would like to see it.
Yeah, that is the window that you can pray, the morning prayer. The time starts as 5:41, but you can pray until the sun rises. So it depends upon which section of 5 minutes you choose to offer your morning prayer.
So you pray until sunrise, is that what you're saying?
I'm sorry, can you clarify then the start time of the last prayer of the day?
Last prayer, let's say today is like around 9:15. And you can pray from 9:15 anytime until the next prayer in the morning. So, but of course, like people try to, of course, it's a working day, and most of the time, the daily prayers are only attended by 5 to 10 people, diehard congregants.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we testified we had testimony at the last hearing that the real early morning prayer and the last prayer of the day are not well attended. And I think Mr. Khan has indicated it's 5 or 6 people.
Especially during winter time and in the winter days, when it's really cold. I would say, as I mentioned, only the diehard congregants go out and pray in congregation. Otherwise, most of the people pray at home.
So will the masjid be open from the last night prayer till the morning prayer, first morning prayer? You said
No.
there-
No.
But a moment ago, you said
You
you're
can-
able to come in and start 9:15? Can you
Usually,
clarify that, please?
When a mosque opens, the first couple of months sets the pattern, like how many people are coming in the morning prayers, how many people are coming in the evening prayers, and that's how the custodian of the mosque, usually they come like 2 minutes or 5 minutes, depending upon how far they live. They open up the mosque, people come, pray, 5-minute prayers maximum, they leave, close the mosque, they go home. That's how it works.
And we're going to provide that calendar for the board, so.
If the board would like my copy with the sunrise and the times, I'm happy to give that to you. My next comment is about the 2 services at Madison Park Firehouse. I'm not sure how there's 30 minutes between services when the first service is approximately starting at 1 o'clock and the second service is at 1:45.
I'm not sure what the question is.
How is there
There's
30
difference
minutes
between the time. It's an extra 15 minutes, right? Is that what you're getting at?
So the first service on Friday begins around 1 o'clock.
Right.
The second service begins around 1:45. So there was comments that there was a half an hour
That's
between
right. So
services.
why is it 15 minutes longer?
That's again also not said. Every mosque has a different timings because based on that, usually it's, I can give you an example for Islamic Center of Central Jersey, which is one of the biggest mosques in New Jersey. They offer 3 services. They start at 12:30 all the way up to 2:30, depending upon what service you want to attend. So they have 3 services. The same thing if this mosque will have 2 services, they will time it out. It can be 12:30 service, 1 o'clock, 1:30, and the next service is usually 30 to 45 minutes later after the first service.
Mr. Sachs, are you guys flexible on moving that 15 minutes? I mean, that
Yes.
half hour is tight.
Yes.
I'm just talking about what's currently being done at Madison Park Firehouse.
Well, I understand, and
Okay.
I'm trying to make sure that we have enough time, if this is approved, that the half hour is cutting it close, or are they in agreement that they could do the 45 minutes like the Madison
Sure.
Firehouse?
I would also like to know if there's been any traffic studies about currently the situation at Madison Park Firehouse with how many cars are there, because I can attest to the fact that there are way more than 90 cars at the services.
We don't have that data. We have not done any study for the Madison Park Fire.
I do, if you would like it.
Well,
Also, parking at St. Bernadette's.
with all due respect, I'm sure the witness has provided, in her opinion, an accurate count. Excuse me. Well, you're
No,
asking
no,
me a
no,
question.
he's got the
so-
floor.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'd love to respond, but
Go ahead.
again, it's difficult when I'm being interrupted.
Go ahead.
We're letting her talk, but he's answering her question.
I know, I'm waiting for him.
All right, so your question was, did we perform a study at the Madison Park Firehouse? No, we have not. However, if you've got data you'd like to provide for me, I would love to see it. I know you're not a traffic engineer, but I'll take your opinion
Great.
as to the numbers.
Thank you.
okay?
Let's also talk about St. Bernadette's parking. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay. That's okay. Sorry. Also about the parking at St. Bernadette's. Coming out of St. Bernadette's and turning onto Villanova, I'm sorry, I live on Villanova Road. Coming out of Villanova Road and turning onto Ernston Road. I currently have 2 teenage drivers. Most of the time, I will not allow my children to turn out of Villanova Road to make a left onto Ernston Road because it's just too dangerous. Currently, there is not a crosswalk by Villanova Road across Ernston Road, again, because it's too dangerous. You currently have 2 lanes westbound that go down to 1 lane right at Villanova, and 1 lane eastbound that goes up to 2 lanes. It is crazy. So I'm not sure how the applicant thinks using St. Bernadette's and possibly putting in a crosswalk would be safe. Can you answer that?
Sorry, the question was,
How is it safe to put a crosswalk at Villanova for the people to leave St. Bernadette's?
well, it would, again, be subject to county review, but I think the idea would be that we'd put it there with a rectangular flashing beacon, so it would emphasize the location of the crosswalk.
Have you been there?
Yes.
Okay, let's just move on. The last part is for the planning for the Ernston traffic that you were talking about with the warehouses. Is the board aware of the construction for Glenwood Oaks, the housing development that is being built behind ShopRite on Route 9, with the intention that that road will eventually lead into Waterworks and connected to Bordentown Avenue? And how will that affect the traffic in the area? Thousands of homes are currently being built, and apartments are also slated and approved.
I'm not sure that's a question for us. I think
It
that
is,
was
I'm
what-
asking how is that
Well,
gonna
first of
impact
all,
traffic?
again, Mr. Stimmel's testimony is that he spoke to, I believe it was Mr. Mashansky in Sayreville and Mr. Holohan in Old Bridge, and was advised that there were no proposed developments that would impact this particular development, if you want to elaborate on that. Obviously, we were provided incorrect information, i.e. the warehouse project on Cheesequake. But Mr. Stimmel, you want to reply?
That's the gist of it, Mr. Sachs. I contacted the zoning department in Sayreville, zoning department in Old Bridge this week, got a response from both of them, said there were no projects which we needed to consider in our traffic study. So, certainly.
So there, I can agree,
board
there's no
members disagree.
projects for Sayreville or Old Bridge on that plot of Ernston Road, because there's nowhere to put anything. However, there are projects in the vicinity which could greatly impact the traffic in the area. So that might be something everyone needs to look into.
That's what I asked. That's the answer I got. Certainly, we've understand from the board's comments the warehouse project, and we're going to look into that and might follow up again with the two zoning officers and follow up just on other projects in general.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair?
Good evening. My name is Joseph Karmazin. That's K-A-R-M-A-Z-I-N. I live at 322 Ernston Road. I am a direct neighbor of the mosque.
Sure, I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. I just want to make sure folks coming up to the mic know that it's a question and answer period. Some of the people are providing firsthand testimony. They're not sworn, so they have to come back during the general public comment to be sworn in for that testimony to be considered. So I just want to make sure that people understand that, because I think the last, Ms. Esposito came up and had some specific firsthand testimony that she wanted, and it's not going to be part of the record unless folks are sworn in at the end of the, at the public portion comment. So I just want to let people know that, so that you don't think that it's on the record because you say it now. It's not. You got to come back at the end, okay?
Yeah, copy that. Okay. April 22nd analysis had 180 vehicles on site, and with the 109 proposed spots, it just seems like a conundrum. When there's two sessions on a Friday, like I think someone touched on this, but this is I think we need to drive this point home. 90 cars coming in, 90 cars leaving within a 15-minute turnaround period on Ernston Road, people making lefts. I really think it would be beneficial for a one-way in, one-way out scenario, like a church, any other church has, any other place of worship. I think people coming and going out of two entrances and exits not far from one another, it's just, people are going to get in each other's way. It doesn't make sense. I mean, just logically, the way they're proposing this is going to work, it's not going to work. Ernston Road now, today, got backed up almost all the way to the Route 9, and there's no activity at the mosque right now, other than them dumping bricks today. They're dumping debris back there. Oh, by the way, for the record, nothing was demolished. He mentioned buildings were demolished. The tent is still up. They use it as storage, okay? So people are in and out of there. I know testimony, right?
Yeah, I was just
I
gonna.
got you.
Just a reminder, we
I know,
understand.
I just gotta sneak a couple in there.
Hold
All
on,
right.
hold on. No. Please, let me finish. Just so everyone's aware, I understand that there are, sometimes you can't ask a question. You're gonna have to have some information to give background on the question.
Right.
We understand that. But once again, with testimony or any comments you're gonna make, even if you make them now, they're not gonna be, as the board member said, they won't be part of the record. The board won't be able to consider them until you do it at the end. So that's why we want to make sure you're aware of these procedures, because the boards wants to be able to consider your comments. And if you do them now, we can't.
I get it.
All right,
All right.
so
So
we're
the
talking
question
about
is,
parking.
The question is, really for the board, I suppose. Do you guys really feel that this is going to work? With that parking situation on the in and the out? I mean, it's not, making a left out of there is so dangerous. There was already many accidents when they were operating illegally. You can look it up. You can get an Oprah request and see how many accidents were already in front of that place. Okay, no testimony. Let's see. I want to talk about the cops outside for Ramadan. Now I'm a direct neighbor across the street, and the cops leave their lights on until about 11 o'clock at night. Lights my house up like Christmas. It's really, for 30 days, they said Ramadan's a one event. Yeah, it's one event for 30 days long. And it is 24 hours. It's all hours. People come and go. I lived it. Also, I wanted to talk about the fire marshal. Did you guys say they signed off on this yet, or?
Sir, and again, all of your comments are important, and there's certainly be a time for public commentary. However, this session is limited to questions and comments about the traffic portion of it. Certainly, I believe Mr. Sachs testified that there has been a submission made to the fire marshal.
Okay.
A response has not been received yet. When there is, it's a document that will be part of this record, which will be made available to the public, and you can question on. But in order to ensure a clean record, we have to limit this portion, this section of the application to questions relating to the traffic study as well as the parking, so traffic
Okay.
and parking.
I have parking questions. Well, what, the fire truck? The fire truck, that's part of it, right? They're supposed to be able to turn around?
So as part of every application, they request a turning radius or a circulation plan for
Right.
emergency vehicles. Again, that's not part of this part of the
Okay,
application.
that's not part of it, okay.
That will be addressed, I'm sure, by the applicant, that will be addressed. And
Okay.
again, that is a report that would be made available to the public that you would see to show whether or not whether or not Sayreville's emergency vehicles are able to properly and safely circulate that property.
Right.
Yeah, and Mr. Pullman, we do have turning templates that have been provided, so they already have been provided.
Okay, I believe there was a waiver requested for the parking spots in the front. They're supposed to be set so far back, and they requested a waiver, they said last meeting. Is that correct, Mr. Sachs?
Yeah, we're going to address that with our planning testimony. when our
Okay, I have
planner
an issue with the parking spots proposed. They're facing my house, which means headlights will be shining on my house. And I have an issue with that,
Point taken.
okay?
You can request that the applicant address screening issues, sir. Screening so that you don't.
Screening edge for the light.
Some buffering, some additional buffering.
Okay, well, I thought that's why you're supposed to be set back so far, so, oh, okay, all right, yeah, sure, put bushes. Okay, so the crosswalk situation, I know the other lady there had brought it up, and being that I live across the street, people were crossing right in front of my house, using my driveway as a crosswalk. The nearest crosswalk is Ernst and Bordentown, the other one is all the way up by Gateway Light. Okay, there is no way people are gonna not cross Ernstine Road coming from Madison Park. It's a safety concern. They're definitely going to do it. There's no other way to get there. Yeah, unless you add an additional traffic light somewhere on Ernstine Road where they can hit a button and cross safely, I don't see how this is gonna work for overflow. I mean, it's a half a mile away. St. Bernadette's is a half a mile away from their mosque. That's a hike. You know, when it's raining, when it's 0 degrees outside, they're going to make this trek? I highly doubt it. I highly doubt it. Oh, yes, so the other thing was the buses. I know they're saying, you know, they're claiming there's not going to be buses, but there's going to be schooling, there's going to be children, there's going to be basketball. We all know, we've all gone to different churches and played in different leagues. There's always buses. You're going to need buses. It's an absolute must. There's no way you're going to cart these people on a Ford Escape.
I think that's why the town's traffic engineer, special traffic engineer, did request that the applicant address the busing issue for the exact points that you raised. The expert stated that he foresees, based on his experience, that it's likely that there may be buses at some point, which is why they've asked the applicant to specifically address that issue. The applicant has acknowledged that they will, and we expect that we'll have an updated report on that before the next meeting.
Oh, good. The other thing, he mentioned something about a drop-off point in the front. Can you elaborate a little bit about that, please?
Well, I think we said we're going to provide some type of detail, which will show where a drop-off would be, and we'll provide that to the board.
Okay, so there's nothing drawn in the parking lot for a drop-off point, right?
Right now, I don't believe there's anything on the plan.
So it would have to be updated. Okay. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
How you doing? Rudy James. I live on Parkway. RUDYJAMES. So, Parkway Place. That's all you got. No, I'm good. I live right off the block, so I'm good. They can find me if they want to come up the block. So I understand that. That's good. Someone else didn't have to do that either, so I'll take that same liberty. I'm curious if either one of you gentlemen have actually done any projects in Sayreville before and what they were. Any of these traffic, you know.
Are you asking of my professionals?
Either one of you. Yeah, whoever wants to answer that question. In Sayreville specifically, just curious.
Well, well, Mr. Stimmel.
It's a question.
My office is in Rutherford. Most of the work I do is up north. I'm sure that I've worked in Sayreville in the past, but it's been 12 years probably.
Okay. Could we maybe be afforded some of the projects that have previously been worked on with this crew in Sayreville?
Sorry, I didn't understand the
We'd
question.
like to know what projects you previously worked on in Saraville.
What
Like, maybe
projects
go
I
look
worked
it up
on?
and come back and let us know, yeah.
Well,
Are you able to do that? That's the question.
No,
No, okay.
no, I'm not able to do that.
Okay. Just because of the variances that we have here, I'm just curious how any other variances might appear. On top of that, do you have any ideas or is there any plan for permit parking for residents? Being that, people may park otherwise and not want to travel up the block. Understandably, by the way.
Am I aware of permit parking for
Yeah,
residents?
like Parkway Place, if say, we want to make sure people aren't going to be parking on Parkway Place, is there some sort of amenity that's going to be provided, like parking permits? Is that in the plan? I didn't see that. Just curious. So I've lived there for about 10 years. Sorry, I apologize. I've lived there, just to give you background on this, I've lived there for about 10 years. I believe previously there were even some signs up over there in that way. There's buses and things that have left there over the years, and some of that has dwindled. But parking has always been a concern there. It's a small neighborhood, and the idea of making a right-hand turn out of Parkway Place, getting to a question, is not only dangerous, okay, but it has proven to have issues for all the businesses in that area, okay, because it gets backed up. So in the parking reports that y'all did that were of a certain amount of time, and obviously, I'm sorry, Bernie, give me a minute here, but obviously not the amount of time that should have been checked, okay? Did you take into consideration the safety and previous accidents that have happened at that location? Okay, are we good?
I think, hold on, I think that,
I'm trying to
Mr.
write
Sachs,
down
We're trying to write down your question, but go ahead.
No problem.
Okay, so I
She's
need to
actually
follow
taking
up on
notes,
them
so you
later.
might want to get them
Mr.
answered.
Sachs,
I got 3
I think the
minutes.
gentleman's question is, in developing the traffic plan for the site, did the experts consider the past history of accidents, pedestrian strikes, MVAs, anything along those lines? And if so, what role did that play in the development of this traffic plan?
We looked at the traffic safety associated with the proposed driveway locations at the subject property. The issue with the pedestrian crossings is something that has come up relatively recently in terms of this project with the possibility of off-site parking at St. Bernadette. So we haven't investigated any past pedestrian safety issues crossing Ernston Road. As far as the driveway is concerned, the location of the driveways, the sight lines, et cetera, all of that is fine. It's in accordance with accepted engineering standards and has been approved by the county. The pedestrian issue, the possibility of a sidewalk, crosswalk rather, would require some further investigation.
It sounds like there's a lot of work still to get done here before you submit for an application. That's a question, I'm just saying. I'm a
You're
business
correct.
owner. I've been doing this for a long time.
You're
and
correct.
This doesn't, thank you, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
You're correct.
Yeah, I know that I need to comply under certain things. It's called compliance. I know we've talked about accountability, but I think that there's been some maybe loopholes taken into account with the, I don't know, how many people are gonna be here. 250 square feet is a hotel room. So we are accommodating one person per hotel room. Is that what we're saying? So let's confirm that also.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if it's a comment, if it's
No,
a
no,
question.
are you estimating on one person per 250 feet?
Well, I think the comment
No?
by I think the comment by our
Oh,
engineer.
the parking space. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Larry.
Thank you. Thank you. I think the comment by the expert, by Mr. Stimmel, is that the number of parking spaces in his calculation is based on the square footage in the building, and it's one space per 250 square feet.
In a 14,000 square foot prayer area. Where's the math in?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Where does the math? You ever heard that? No? Okay. How does your math add up?
I think my expert has provided that testimony several times this evening, sir, so.
He hasn't provided an answer that I believe a math teacher would accept. So let's start there. All right, I'm good. Thanks.
Tough crowd, huh?
Speak up, please.
My name is Prithvik Patel. Prithvik Patel. P-R-U-T-H-V-I-K. Patel. P-A-T-E-L. All right. Yeah, sure. All right. All right. So my question is for Mr. Khan. As we discussed in the last, I'm sorry. 8 single court, Parlin. All right. So as we discussed last time, you said the building will be designed as per 2021 IBC, right? That's the International Building Code, right? And International Building Code 2021 refers to ASC 716 for the wind speeds, correct?
I'm not an architect, that's a question for architect, but yeah, whatever the code requires, the building and the whole site will be designed per the building code and township or town and county ordinances. Yes.
Yes, agreed. As per ASC 716, the wind speed that the building will be designed for will be 115 miles per hour, 115 miles per hour. Has any one of you in Parlin been in this wind speed?
That's a code.
Yeah, that's the code.
you
No,
have
no,
to
no.
require.
I agree with it. I'm a structural engineer. I'm licensed in New Jersey. I know. And I agree with the code. We have to follow the code. But you have not seen this wind speed, right? But we still design the building for the worst case scenario. You are also going to design the sewage for the worst case scenario. But when it comes to parking, the traffic engineer very conservatively takes a very low number. And he says that my applicant told me that only 150, 120 people will come in. If you are an engineer, I understand that you don't have enough data points. He said that the TIA or the report has only 2 mosques listed in there. And they carried out 2 other mosques as well. I understand 4 data points doesn't make sense. So if that doesn't make sense, doesn't it make engineering judgment to go with the worst case scenario? You are the engineer, sir, right, on the town council? You, sir? Yeah, you are the town engineer. Doesn't it make sense, engineering sense, that if you don't have enough data, we should go with the worst case?
Sir, but
Right?
certainly, you're certainly educated in this area. I just have to remind you to please direct your question to that engineer. And so is your question to the engineer that you as a professional are asking, why is the parking plan being scaled down to a lower level than the maximum amount of parking that may be available on the site? Sir, please, folks, please. Sir, is that your question to the engineer?
That is my question,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
But the reason I asked him was because he is an
we just have
impartial
to-
party.
And it's difficult, and there's form over process sometimes, and I understand how it can be frustrating, but in order to ensure that we have a clean record, there is certainly going to be a time where every member of the public, every resident of Sayreville, of Old Bridge, of Parlin, will be able to will make comments, have questions, present this board. But at this point, yes, in the process, the way the municipal land use law in the state of New Jersey establishes that how these proceedings are done is that the applicant puts on witnesses. When that witness is done presenting their testimony, they're allowed to be questioned by the board and the board professionals. Then the public has the opportunity to question these witnesses when they're doing here. Then when the applicant closes their application is when the public, by law, is provided the opportunity to provide testimony if they want to be sworn in and provide commentary if they wish. And that's the process which we have to follow in order to ensure that we have a clean record and that any decision that's rendered by this board will be supportable and would be upheld upon any judicial review. And so that's why we have to be a stickler to form here. And I'm not going to take your time away because I'm talking a lot, and that's my fault. But I believe that I clarified your question, which is to the engineer, is why, with the respect to the purpose of parking, is he scaling down as opposed to scaling up and assuming that it would be the maximum type of use? Is that
Exactly.
correct? Thank
Yes,
you,
sir.
sir. And you
Yeah.
can,
So were you asking me that question? Or
Whichever engineer wants to answer.
Parking generally is not designed for the worst case scenario. It was something I said in response to the planner from Old Bridge before. Because of a use like this, and again, I think everyone's in agreement on this, most of the parking demand is going to occur during those Friday services. If it lasts 2 hours from the beginning of the first service to the end of the second service, that means the remaining 22 hours of the day and the remaining 6 days of the week, the majority of the parking isn't going to be used by anyone. So the more parking you provide on the subject property is more parking that you're not going to have used most of the time. The intention with these parking requirements is generally to accommodate most of the parking demand on site under the majority of conditions. And the municipalities that are changing their parking requirements are actually making the parking requirements less for the most part, not increasing them, because of the other negative effects that go along with providing parking that's not used most of the time. You know, whether or not someone's parked there, you still have the stormwater runoff, you still have the heat island effect, you have less room for landscaping, and so on. So, you know, and I guess in a more lighthearted manner, the issue is if you don't have enough parking, you've got to find parking someplace further away, whereas if you don't design to meet the wind speed requirements, the building falls over and people die. So the side effects are a little bit lesser too, but that's the
It's
standard.
same rules though, no? Don't we have to follow the code though?
Well, you can ask,
So if-
you can ask for a variance or a waiver from the parking requirement. The building code is another matter.
Okay, so majority of the time in Sayreville, there will be maybe, let's say, 60 miles per hour wind speeds. So let's just design the structures for 60 miles per hour. Why are we wasting money? Ask him how much money he'll save if you design the structure for 60 miles per hour. A lot of money, a lot of man hours. So it doesn't make sense. He's telling from the first point that he doesn't have enough data points. I agree to his point. He doesn't have enough data points. That's why we have to go with the worst case scenario. And I would like the town council to concentrate on this point and make a decision on that. That's all I have. Do I have to stay till the end? Do I have to stay till the end?
No, sir, you're not required to stay. You can leave at any time. There's no.
Oh, no, about that signing thing, I don't know. So I didn't get that. All right, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michael Delaney, Delaney, 4 Bilac Place, Parlin. I just have, I beg your pardon?
Talking about traffic.
I have a few questions for Mr. Stimmel, if that's okay?
That's perfect.
Thank you. Mr. Stimmel, you testified earlier when you were reading from your August 8th, 2023 report, as well as in the response to the Brightview report, that one of the sources of your information was information from your client. Is that correct?
Yes.
What, if anything, did you do to verify the accuracy of that information?
Mainly, I looked at the data for the existing use on the property. We had counts at the site when it was operating as a mosque, and the numbers he was proposing seemed reasonable based on the utilization of that site for that use.
So, for example, one of the sources of information, I'm sorry, one of the numbers that you testified was 300 members, I guess we're calling them. Was that something that you verified, that number?
That was just provided in testimony at the last hearing, the 300 members in the congregation.
That's something that you said this evening in response to an inquiry with regard to the Brightview report and some of the issues that it raised, specifically with vehicle counts. You were talking
Correct.
about 300 members.
That
Did
was
you do-
testified to on the record at the last meeting.
Okay. My question again, sir, to you was, did you personally do anything to verify that information which was provided to you by your client?
No.
You did not. Okay. In your experience as a professional, testifying as an expert, have you ever come across an information where the data that you relied on is inaccurate? Other than this evening?
I wouldn't make that stipulation about the data this evening. I would say that I've relied on data which has been updated as more data has become available. Okay. I don't think I've ever relied on data that I've found to be inaccurate.
If you did find that a conclusion that you gave was based upon inaccurate data, would that also result in the conclusion being inaccurate?
Not necessarily. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what the future holds. We don't know exactly how much traffic this site is going to generate if and when it gets approved. We're trying to provide a projection of future traffic operations based on the best data available. So if in the future the site generates more, obviously we're talking if it's approved, if the site generates more traffic than what the client had indicated, what our projection showed, what the prior counts at the site had shown, There was a discussion, or I believe it might have been in Mr. Cornell's review letter, that the applicant should provide an after-the-fact traffic study if and when the site becomes operational to review any issues with access, parking, circulation, et cetera, that may come up. And I think, the client has agreed to comply with a number of other comments from the board professionals and would certainly comply with that. So the last thing we want to do is do anything that poses a safety issue down the road. We want to get this right. We think we've provided the best information. We understand the comments from the board. We're going to come back at a future date to be determined with additional information and try to address the remaining comments at that point.
Thank you, Mr. Stimmel, but would you answer the question that I asked you, please? The question that I asked you, please, was, in your experience, does inaccurate information invalidate a conclusion based upon that information? Yes, it does. No, it does not.
It requires a new analysis. It doesn't necessarily invalidate it. You could still come to the same conclusion based on the updated data.
Fantastic. Okay. I had one more question. Mr. Zabrowski asked you a follow-up about, I guess we're calling them comps for some of the other mosques that you viewed, to use a real estate term. I don't know if he asked to include any information you had about the number of cars and the number of people, but to the extent that that hasn't already been asked, could I respectfully request that that information also be provided in your response?
Certainly.
Thank you. And the last issue, last question is, I don't know if it's for Mr. Stimmel or Mr. Sachs or the board, but this reciprocal agreement with St. Bernadette's that we heard about, is that, Mr. Sachs, I guess, when we were here on April 3rd, you said there was an overflow agreement. Is that the overflow agreement you referred to earlier? And to the extent that's I'm sorry.
Yeah, to the extent that there's a need to utilize that parking lot, that would be for overflow.
Okay. To the extent that that's in writing, I would also respectfully request that that be submitted to the board and also updated to the public documents that are available for public review. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Richard Connolly, Connolly. I live at 3050 Cheesequake Road in Parlin. That's the Old Bridge side of Parlin. There's been a lot of chit-chat about the number of parking spaces that need to be available. And they had services at the Madison Park Firehouse, the same road that I live on. And I drove by and saw a whole bunch of cars there. This question is for everybody here. Did anybody of authority go there and actually count cars?
Sir, again, I have to remind you to please direct your question, which is a very good question, to the traffic expert. The
question was, if you counted the cars, you could say yes.
Sir,
and if he counted the cars, you could say yes. Did anybody here count the cars?
Sir,
and if the answer is no, why not?
Sir, at this time, all questions have to be directed to the expert. And I will just bring to your attention that a prior member of the public did ask that question. And I believe Mr. Stimmel can respond, but I believe Mr. Stimmel stated that he had not viewed the cars at that firehouse location during services, but he can certainly respond.
That is correct. We haven't counted cars at that location. We are certainly looking at it for the next meeting.
I know it's not on the record or anything. I counted them. I got pictures.
And sir, when it comes to
certainly over 100, it was 145.
And sir, when it comes to the time when the applicant has closed their case and it comes time for public commentary and testimony, you can certainly come and put that information into the record. And the information that you observe, you can place into the record at that time, and the board will be able to consider it.
Understood, but now this is a comment, and then I'll be done. But this is Saraville. I live in Old Bridge, but somebody from Saraville should have counted the cars.
Well, we'll always remind the public and the members of the board that the consideration of the information in this application has to be contained to what's presented during the course of the hearing. And the evidence that's provided by our experts, by the applicant, by its fact witnesses, and by the applicant's experts.
Good evening. My name is Syed Ali, A-L-I. I'm from 44 Kierst Street, Parlin. 44 Kierst Street, K-I-E-R-S-T. I don't really have questions, but I do have some comments for the board's understanding as well as for the general public. Now, we're talking about all the technicalities here as to how many square footage there, how many parking spots should be. One has to understand the demographic of the community that we're dealing with. Now, the expert have already explained over and over that the daily 5 prayers will
So,
have...
sir, the information you have may certainly well be very valuable and important, but again, I have to remind you, this portion of the hearing has to be limited to questions about parking and about traffic related to that site. And in particular, I'm going to ask you to not make any comments about the demographic of this applicant, about the applicant's rituals, about the applicant's number of congregants within the community, because that information is not relevant to this portion of the hearing. And certainly, as I've stated before, there will become a time in the hearing when, after the applicant has put its case in and quote-unquote rested, in which members of the public will be able to provide such testimony, and it's valuable information that you may have, and no one is disputing that. But right now, commentary, particularly commentary about the use and about the demographics of this applicant is not appropriate, and I have to ask that that not be part of the record at this time.
Well, all the chanting here is about the traffic, a number of parking spaces. What I'm trying to explain is when we come to the mosque as a family, if you understand the demographic, if I have a family of 6, I'm not going to come in 6 cars, by the way. I will come in 1 car. So anyone counting one space for 1 car for 3, seats, it's actually irrelevant for this particular project. So everybody has to understand. Plus, we're bringing the traffic issue with other projects. Now, this Arsenal project, I'm sure the board heard the Arsenal project, testimonies from their expert and traffic studies from their expert, and that has been done. Now, who is here to decide that all the trucks from the Arsenal project has to come to this project of the mosque only? There are roads going the other way to the Washington Road. There are trucks which are coming to Bordentown Avenue that is likely to go straight onto Route 9. The trucks are not likely to make right turn to go on to, there may be 1 or 2, but why are we making all that conclusion for this particular application?
So there have been no conclusions that have been reached regarding this. The board has not rendered any opinion or any finding of fact with respect to traffic flow, in particularly off-site traffic issues. There has been no determination made by this board. The board is hearing the questions that are being raised to this expert and the expert's response to it. And the board will be advised as to what information it can and cannot consider. But I just want to be clear, the board has not made any finding that any other project either is beneficial, is not beneficial, has a greater impact than another impact, and certainly has not made any determination regarding the impact of off-site traffic.
All right, thank you.
Good evening. My name's Osman, spelled O-S-M-A-N. Last name Zaman, Z-A-M-A-N. I live at 418 and own 420 Main Street, right across the street. This question's actually for the board. I think we got some new information that the intersection of Cheesequake Road and Bordentown Road was altered for the Arsenal project. And how did that come about? And I wanted to know what ordinances or rules mandated that change. Because if that is allowed for a business, then what changes would be allowed at the intersection of Bordentown Road and Ernston?
Well, if I may, Mr. Chairman, that's not relevant to this particular application. I'm not saying it's not a relevant question, and it's a very good question, and it actually may be something more akin not to this board, but to the actually governing body of the borough. It's not something that's within this board's jurisdiction and definitely not within the jurisdiction of this application. So there's no answer to that, to give you right now, but not to say that's not a good question. It's just something this might not be the right venue for.
Okay, that's fine. That's what my question was. And then second, I wanted to know, would increased traffic flow stop the building of the masjid? I think that's what everyone's trying to see.
Could you maybe rephrase the question? I don't quite understand the question. I apologize.
So the masjid has the right to practice their religion. The congregation has the right to practice their religion. But it looks like that if there's enough traffic that they will not get that right. So is that actually true, or is it coordinating the building with the traffic?
So there has been no decision or any opinion given by this board regarding any aspect of this application at this time. The applicant, which is the mosque, is the party that presented testimony and evidence regarding the traffic, which is why we're discussing it today, because the applicant is putting this information before the board. The reason they're putting it before the board is because traffic flow in and out of the site, the queuing at the site, traffic circulation are all relevant topics with respect to any application for land use development before any board in the state of New Jersey. And so the reason this is being discussed tonight isn't because it's checking a box that we're determining tonight whether it's enough or not enough. It's because the applicant is presenting information to the public, to the board, regarding traffic, because that traffic flow in and out of the site, the queuing getting in and on the road and on the property are all relevant issues to consider, and whether or not this plan is the best plan that it can be is appropriate. So again, the applicant is the one who's presenting this tonight. The board, is not, has not made any decision on anything right now.
Thank you, that's all. Thank you for the clarification.
Before you testify, I'm just going to mention that we're going to stop at 11.
Okay.
Go ahead, ma'am.
My name is Jennifer Edwards. Address is 10 Vincent Street, Parlin. I live behind this proposed location. I had a couple of questions for our experts today. So there was testimony given that the hours were going to be from 6 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. And I know that you reiterated that again. Given that the current website has earlier prayer times and later prayer times, is it your testimony today that those will not be accommodated? Or will they be potentially accommodated outside of the hours that you gave us?
I think I indicated we will provide some type of calendar to the board before the next hearing, which will delineate the specific times. All right, so if I misspoke at the last meeting, which I may have, because I had some knowledge that I know seasonal changes do affect it, but in general, those were the hours that we thought we would be operating. There may be some fluctuation based on seasons, but again, the testimony at the last hearing as well, ma'am, was that the first service, the early morning service, and the late day service is generally not well attended, maybe 5 or 6 patrons, so.
So it is then your testimony today that you...
Well, I don't testify, so.
Okay, well, all right. Well, your comments, per your comments...
That was quick.
Right.
The potential is definitely there that this facility would be open outside of the hours that you're giving.
Yes, that testimony may be subject to revision based upon our look at that calendar.
Okay. Second point or question that I have is regarding traffic. I live in the neighborhood that is directly behind this location. I noticed that absolutely no one here has mentioned it at all. And there's a big concern there in people cutting through and most definitely parking. It is going to be the location for parking. We're well within a half a mile. We're directly behind this facility. So Center Avenue and Parkway Place are the two side streets between Route 9 and Bordentown Avenue. They're not mentioned, nobody's talking about them. There's been no part of the traffic study involving these streets. Also Villanova Road, which is almost directly opposite Center Avenue. I wanted to ask, is there a reason why, besides inconvenient truths, is there a reason why these other intersections were not addressed in part of the traffic study? I'll let you answer that, and then I'll continue.
Sure. The idea was to focus on the location of the site driveways when the site was operational, and also the intersection of Bordentown Avenue, given that it was the nearest intersection where we anticipated a significant volume of turning movements. The intersection of Ernston and Center and Ernston and Parkway Place are controlled by stop signs on the Minor Street approach, obviously. Most of the site traffic added to that location was expected to be through traffic, and therefore did not feel it would have a significant impact on operations at that location. So that's the reason that it wasn't, those intersections weren't counted and weren't included in the traffic study, other than a mention in the initial traffic report that basically said what I just told you.
Okay. Just a comment. I obviously use Center Avenue often to get out onto Ernston Road East. Just a few weeks ago, I was trying to make a left out of that intersection, and I sat there for a full 2 minutes because I timed it, which is 2 full green lights at Bordentown and Ernston Road to make a left. Numerous people in our family have had accidents at that intersection. It's a very rough intersection. Just would like to request that it be taken into consideration. Again, it's also where the road goes from 2 lanes down to 1. Additional concerns. Parking permits, as was mentioned by Mr. James. Is there a way that we can ensure that no one will be parking on these streets that doesn't live there? So resident permits. Also, if there's an exit, the western exit of this facility, if there's a right turn only required there, I'm concerned that people are going to make a right, make the first right up Parkway Place and cut through the neighborhood, making it thus much harder to get out of our neighborhood. One more thing to note, there are only 2 streets out of our neighborhood. There are 120 homes, 2 ways out. That's it. Both onto Ernston Road, both on one side or the other of this location. So the only way out is Ernston Road.
I can answer part of that question regarding parking permits. Certainly this board could put a condition in any resolution, if it acts favorably, that would basically prohibit this facility to park in that residential neighborhood. And more importantly, I think what the board could do is recommend to the Borough Council that there be parking signage in residential neighborhood in Sayreville stating that it could be resident parking. Obviously, that requires action by your council, but if the board wants to impose a condition upon us that we would not utilize the residential neighborhood for parking, you know, of course, unless somebody lives there and happens to walk to the facility, but, you know, that's certainly something that we would be amenable to.
Okay, and would it be possible also for there be a condition made for no through traffic? For no through traffic?
Well, I think, again, that would have to be handled by the Borough Council.
That's outside of the scope of the authority of this board.
Okay. It couldn't be made a part of a consideration for approval?
No, no, the regulating street traffic like that is within the purview of the governing body.
May I ask who the governing body is that would be responsible for that?
The council, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And I also wanted to thank everyone for asking very valid questions.
Thank you very much. All right, we've got 3 people in the queue, 4 people in the queue. We got 1, you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Debbie Lynch, Pulaski Avenue in Sayreville, 145. This evening, you talked about the overflow of parking, and everybody's talking about Kennedy Park, the high school, St. Bernadette's. How is that a guarantee? Our mayor, our superintendent, the pastor of St. Bernadette's, they're not going to be here forever. Who is going to guarantee that that is going to take place? Do we have,
Mr. Sachs, do you have an agreement with St. Bernadette's?
Yeah, we do have
with
an
the
agreement.
current pastor,
I'm sorry.
correct? With the current pastor?
We have an agreement with St. Bernadette's. I'm not sure who's the one who made that agreement, but there is an agreement in place. With respect to the use of the park, that is something that has been coordinated with the borough of Sayreville.
Right.
You know,
It's
obviously.
happened.
Yeah, and certainly, I don't know if the War Memorial High School is being used. I don't think so, right? Is the high school being used? Okay. So there's an agreement with the Board of Education as well.
But that's the current Board of Education. What happens when Dr. Labby retires or when
Well-
Mayor O'Brien is no longer mayor?
Again, I'll respond, Mr. Chairman, if you'd like. I mean,
Go ahead.
I
I don't know how to.
I can't account for what happens to the future, but, you know, let's all recognize that the mosque is presently operating in Sayreville, and I'm not sure that there would ever be the intention of either the governing body or the Board of Education to ever renege on an agreement to utilize public facilities.
But I think that is something that needs to be taken into consideration when you're talking about the parking that everybody else has been bringing up this evening. And also, we talked about the warehouses on Cheesequake Road. Do we also need to talk about the other warehouses that are being built in town on Main Street, all the apartments, the condos that are going up? We have, what, 344 opening up in town on Main Street, another 144 in Mechanicsville. You got to multiply that by 3 or 4 cars per unit. That's a lot of more traffic being generated in this town that I don't know if these gentlemen have taken into consideration. Gentlemen, do you need any more info on what's being built?
I mean, we were advised, quite frankly, through both Sayreville and Old Bridge, that there were no other developments which would impact traffic for this particular site. Certainly, we know that we all live in New Jersey, and there are developments that occur in every municipality. We live in the state that has the largest population density in the United States, but certainly that doesn't preclude developments from being built,
No,
and particularly
I understand
houses of worship.
Okay, thank you.
All right, it's 5 of. This is going to be our last tonight, and then we're going to have some closing remarks.
My name is Ghalib Syed, 3 Sophie Street, Ghalib, Ghalib, as in boy. Last name is Syed, Sam Yankee Edward David, 3 Sophie Street, Harlan, New Jersey. Just wanted to bring your attention that the mosque, which was under construction in East Brunswick, is operational now, and they have approximately 100 parking spots and very well managed crowd. The attendees come in. We had, although I'm resident of Sayreville, but I have attended several times the prayers in East Brunswick, and they have organized multiple sessions of prayers on Fridays so that they don't overflow the parking spots. And fortunately, their streets are parking friendly. Okay, so in case if they go overflow, then they can park on the streets. But the good thing here is on the Masjid al-Sadr, which we are constructing, we have similar prototype. We are going to have the number of parking spots specified, And then we also have multiple sessions. And I believe, I'm a worshiper in that mosque. I'm not part of the management, but by experience, what I have seen, that if the sessions are going maximizing, then they can go and add more sessions. So in case if they are having only 2 sessions of prayers on Friday, they can add 1 more to ensure that there is a organized parking management. So that's one thing. And few years back, I also have sat on the board of one of the mosques in Old Bridge, and that is one of the busiest mosques in the vicinity. And that happens to also be on the Route 35. Very busy in traffic, and also the traffic flow is very speedy as well. So that brings us to a risk management as well, that how do we manage that risk? So the way we have done that
Sir, do you have a question, sir?
I'm sorry?
Do you have a question, sir?
I'm talking on the traffic.
Yeah, but you have to ask a question.
Okay, so my question is going to be...
to their traffic engineer, traffic and
Actually, I don't really have a question. I was just going and giving you the information.
Then you're going to have to come back and give testimony after it all, okay? If you want to get sworn in and give your...
One thing I just wanted to add here is that if we have, the question here would be that if we exceed the first session of 109 cars, 114 cars, the second session, then are we willing to add 1 more session on Friday, three sessions of prayers?
We'll give that some thought.
Okay. Ma'am, you have 3 minutes.
Sharon Rodas, RODAS, 2nd Street, Sayreville. Sir, I'm just asking, there's 3 other churches in Sayreville. Have you taken a look at their properties? I think these churches were built, 2 of them maybe 75, 100 years ago, and the New Christ Church on the Main Street extension. Have you gone over and looked at the size of their properties
For what purpose?
to compare what you're building?
No, I don't, no. I mean,
Okay.
obviously, you'd be comparing apples to oranges, so no, we have not.
Okay. Well, they have enormous parking, enormous ways to get out of their property, and that's what this whole town is worried about: the traffic, the property, the parking. In relation to St. Bernadette's, if it's a rainy night, snowy night, I don't know how many people are going to be parking at St. Bernadette's. When they're walking across Ernston Road, that's going to create a total backup. How are you going to handle 30, 40 people crossing Ernston Road? A man just died in Sayreville about a month ago on Washington Road, 51-year-old man. How are you going to take care of people walking from St. Bernadette's? What if they slip and fall on those side streets? Who's responsible?
They are.
Well, I'm going to have Mr. Stimmel answer that question, but again, the 200 spaces that are available at St. Bernadette's are for overflow parking if it's even necessary on a Friday. But Mr. Stimmel, I don't know if you want to respond.
Well, yeah, certainly I agree with that, and also the fact that we have police traffic directors at the driveways to help people cross. So I think those
So
two
that'll
factors
stop
are
the
worth
traffic
considering.
on Ernston Road. How are medical vehicles going to get through? I think you need to do another traffic study at 5:30, like during the months of September, October, November, December. You haven't done a traffic study at 5:30 during the busy months.
We have not done a traffic study at 5:30 because it's outside of when we anticipate the site to generate a lot of traffic. There's been some discussion about clarifying what events are happening at what times on the subject property, and the board's traffic engineer has requested ATR data, which just means automatic traffic recorders that run for a whole week, to look at 1 week, 7 days, 24 hours with a directional split to evaluate traffic at other times of the day. So we're in the process of responding to that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, that concludes our testimony tonight. I'd like to thank the public for being extremely good. This was a lot easier than the first one. We're going to have this again.
Well, I think we originally were thinking May 15th, but
That's
that's
not
not going to
gonna
happen. Okay, so
June 19th?
June 19th.
June 19th, we will not renotice because we're going to have it in the same place, the same time. Go ahead. I can't hear you. Yes, we're going to start right back up where we did. Otherwise, we'll be here until 2 o'clock in the morning. All right. Mr. Sachs, you're fine? I'd like to thank the board, thank everybody that came, and thank the officers.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. All right, well, we need a motion.
He needs to agree to carry it no further notice.
You need to agree to carry it with no further notice?
As, just so the record is clear, the next hearing on this application will be June 19th at 7:30 p.m. Without further notice, we will also agree to extend the mandatory date for action to July 31st, just so
Okay.
the board is protected. Thank you. Same location.
Close the public, close it?
Make a motion to close the public?
Take a, I'll close the public portion.
Make a motion?
Get a second? Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. Need a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn?
What's next?
Mr. Chairman, if I might, you had an application scheduled for your March 5th, or your May 15th meeting. That recently asked to be carried to your June 5th meeting, so you don't have anything scheduled for your next meeting.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to cancel or have it for other purposes.
We should cancel it.
You can, yeah.
We'll cancel the May 15th meeting. All in favor?
To cancel.
I need a
Canceling the May
motion to
15th
cancel
meeting.
the May 15th meeting. Yes? All in favor? Aye. Need a motion to close?
Motion?
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for a great job.